Ready? Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My name is Branstner, and I was invited here by Bev and Les and many others to sit through that. I might get a little interference by that microphone or that speaker there. Yeah, it's interesting because we're on our way here. We had 4 people in the car. We navigated our way around here about 5 times. Seriously, it took us almost 45 minutes to go 8 miles. That's not joke either. We went down 7, up 6. I don't even know. We kept saying 5 miles, so we didn't have to do it. We were hoping to get some sightseeing, but it ended up being dark, so we didn't get anything. So anyways, thank you for coming. I was just down in near the Rochester area a couple weeks ago. So is anybody here that was there? Got a few. So I'm going to try. I don't like to do the same presentation wherever I go. A lot of this is the same, but I added a whole bunch more to make it easy for those people. And plus, and I also implement things into your community, so I'm going to bring it home to you. So this isn't just something that I'm going to have to stand over here. This isn't just something that's just generic worldwide or in the state or in the country. This is going to bring it right home to you. And I think in the end, if you stay around, it gets lengthy, but if you stay around, you guys are going to understand that there's something nefarious that's happening here, not just in Minnesota, not just in the country, but in the world. And I can actually lay it out to you in a, hopefully in an easy, I wouldn't say it's easy. It's easier for me because I understand the terminology. If you think that this gets a little bit too difficult, just kind of raise your hand and just slow me down because sometimes I go fast as though I know or think that you know it. Okay, so just say, hey, Ron, and that's okay. Just say, hey, Ron, just slow it down a little bit and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. We're going to hit about 4 or 5, even 6 different levels of information. And I wanted to start out with a story tonight that a lot of you are probably familiar with. At least looking at this crowd, I think most of you are familiar with this story. I was living in California for 20 years. I'm from Minnesota, came back. But in that time of living in California, I started working on doing volunteer work on the border, where they were building the fence and they were doing border watches. And so we were called the California-Arizona Minuteman. You probably heard of that, right? We were just a border watch group, and even the federal government didn't like us because all we did is sat there in the morning, we just sat and drank coffee, ate donuts, and went out about every quarter mile and watched immigrants cross the border. And sometimes we would save the immigrant, because if the immigrant was traveling across and they were dying of thirst, we would give them water. We couldn't approach them, but if they approached us for help, we would then help them out. And there was situations down there I don't want to get into, but as far as bodies and atrocities and rapes and rape trees, and most of us up here don't even have a clue of what's actually happening on the border. We think, and they tell us it's about people crossing the border, but it's more than that. The border is an open place for drugs, massive amount of drugs that are crossing the border. And so, I mean, we would find the drugs laying in the desert, bodies laying in the desert. And there's a lot of atrocities. If you don't keep up with the group or the leader called the coyote, that coyote will stop you. And if there's a woman in that group, he will rape you if you don't keep up with him. Because this is human trafficking. Whether they want to call it humanitarianism, there's no humanitarianism. This is purely human trafficking of drug runners, gangs, people trying to make it over here, the families are over here, there's gun running, there's just a whole array of different things that are happening on the border. It isn't just about people crossing the border for humanitarian reasons. That's a small percentage of it. I worked with a lot of Hispanics in California, and most of those did not cross. They came here illegally, and they did not cross over the border through the desert. They drove across the border. Most of the people drive across the border. They teach me how to do it. They say you never wear sunglasses, you know the border patrol guard, you pay the border patrol guard. There's a lot of that's happening. So that wall is kind of like that Trump and many of them are talking about is kind of a sidebar. Because you remember back in 2008, they passed $700 million. Remember that in 2008? Passed $700 million to get the wall. Democrats and Republicans both voted on that. but they never used the $700 million. So both sides have always been doing this, and they've been doing this for years. They're going back and forth. One wants the wall. So whoever's in charge, the other one's the opposite. And if they do get the money for the wall, chances are that money will never be used, just like it was in 2008. They'll tie the money up, the courts will tie it up, it'll never be used. This is a game that they played in 2008 with the game you made. It's a game they've been playing with us for over 25, 30 years, and it's continued, and we're all falling into the trap of this is something that it's for us. This is a political game for big business. And I'm going to teach you that tonight, that this is all purely big business. This is human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all of that is included. And we are using these people as citizens. We're just as much guilty as the federal government, because if we support this, we support all of these things. Because this is, I'll give you an example. In 1865, or when Lincoln was president, they were human trafficking at that time, weren't we? Weren't we buying the slaves from Africa? We bought them and brought them over to the United States, and we used them as cheap labor. We did that with the coolies, which we call the Chinese. We did that with many different cultures. We have been using people for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is not something foreign to us. So we bought them. They huddled them up in the camps into Africa in the 1800s. They then went into the camps and they took them out of the camps and they sold them off as a bill of goods, right? What's the difference today? We got refugee camps. They huddled them up, government shuffled them out of atrocities, put them in the camps, and we buy them out of camps. And suddenly we say this is a different thing than 1800s. Oh, this is different because the government's doing it. No, it's not. We bought them. They are a commodity. And if they're not a commodity, then why is it that everything that when they come to the United States, we give them everything they want? Back then, the owner of the slave had to take care of them, didn't he? He had to house them, food them, clothe them. He had to keep them in good shape because, according to them, that was their farm equipment, wasn't it? What are we doing? We're housing them. We're giving them welfare, social security, everything. We're giving the whole carte blanche. Because we have to keep them to do what? To work for the low, cheap labor. This is modern-day slave labor. And we need to understand that there's no separation from the 1800s. We are slave owners. And those who protect these slaves and who say they want to encapsulate them into sanctuary city policies are then also the slave owners, aren't they? They're the slave owners because they can encapsulate. They built the wall around the city, didn't they? A wall that they say they don't want in Minneapolis, San Francisco, or a border state like California. They say they don't want walls, right? But then they put a wall around the city and say, hey, it's a sanctuary city. Don't leave, you slaves. Don't use you immigrants, don't leave, because if you do, right? So they encapsulate them, they enslave them into the city, and they take care of them just like the farmer. And if you leave outside the city, what happens? ICE comes, deports you. If you left outside a farmer's field, when the farmer owned you, what happens when you were trying to run north? They capture you, right? They either imprisoned you or went back to your slaves. There's no difference. This is modern day slave labor. This is human trafficking. And we want to separate it as though it's a Republican Democrat issue, and it isn't. The Democrats and Republicans are equally to blame because when the Republicans were fully in charge, they could have done something they did. When the Democrats were fully in charge, they didn't do anything. They did nothing. They wait until the end like they did this past week, and then all of a sudden they made a decision, maybe we should shut down the government. A week before the transition of the new Congress. Why? Because the new Congress is coming here and shuffling it off, now it's back to being tied up again. They're playing us all like we're stupid. I mean, we need to understand this is modern day slave labor. So, that just shut up. Uh-oh.
Your cables, I think your cable's just there.
Okay. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to tell you guys a story because this is getting long, and I had to get that out of the way. Back to 1985, everybody remembers the strike of Hormel, the P9 strike, right? It's a big deal. It's a strike of all centuries, a strike on the food industry. Okay, this is going to lead into why this is an important conversation. This strike means everything, especially you guys in this area. It's still here today. The P9 strike went on, and Hormel went down, and they put a strike on them, and they kept depreciating their wages. They were the highest paid meatpacking plant in the country. They were the best place to work for. People worked there for 45 years. Their grandfather and their great-grandfather worked for Hormel. Many people worked for it. That was a great company to work for. Even today, their profit sharing and their wages and everything is really good. I went through their plan. But in 1985, they had a strike, and then when they strike, they went on and they said, okay, either we're going to have to move, or we're going to have cheap labor. And so they kind of held that against them. They struck 3 times, and then, of course, you know what happened. People started leaving the industry, going out to different jobs. A guy named Jerry Amundsen, treasurer of Hormel Foundation, said that, and I got this all, and by the way, this is all in writing. I've been doing this for years. Jerry Amundsen said, if cheap labor doesn't come to us, we're going to go to him. He's the treasurer of Hormel Foundation. He goes on, and he goes on to talk to the head of the CEO of Hormel, named Dick Knowlton, and said, we need to do something. We need to have cheap labor come here. Now remember, this is all slave labor, right? They weren't going out there looking for people for low wages. They were going out for slave cheap labor. If cheap labor doesn't come to us, we're going to it. He said it right to Roger Bottom. And I got a quote on that. So what they did is they went out searching for cheap labor. They went all the way down to the south. They went all the way down to Mexico. This is what I'm understanding with Mexico. At least they went down to at least Texas to get the cheap labor. So as cheap labor came in, they said, okay, if we get cheap labor, that means most of the people here can't speak English. We're going to have a problem on the lines. We're going to have a lot of translation issues, so on and so forth. So Hormel had to figure something out. They said, okay, Jerry Amundsen went to Dick Knowlton, CEO, and said, if you give us $10 million, we can set up this program and we can make this whole thing work, and we can do ESL languages, we can get them into housing, we can get them, and then this whole thing will work, right? Well, Dick Knowlton said, I'll give you 5, but you have to raise the other 5. And so he gave them $5 million, the Hormel did, and they went out and they created this group. Started out with 70 down to 16 people, and they created this group called Apex Austin. Apex Austin created this organization that says, okay, if we partner up with the city, because the city, Apex Austin, and Hormel all partnered up together, if we create this program, we're going to make this thing successful, and we're going to flip this city into a multicultural city. They're hearing all these words now, diversity, diversity, diversity. You're hearing all the time, right? Well, they are the captain of the diversity ship. They're the leaders. And many cities were following to see if this city could do what they want to do, and the citizens of the city didn't know this was happening. This was all done behind the scenes through Apex Austin. If they could do this, they were actually putting this in magazines like GCIR, Grant Makers Concerns for Immigration Reduction. They were doing, I mean, it was going all over, but it wasn't going in the city, so nobody knew what was happening. So they created, the Apex Austin created 7 different programs. They created ESL, some housing issues, some translation people. They created a welcome center. And welcome centers you'll see in all these small towns, like, they call them different names in each city, Winona, the Welcome Center, Fairmont Welcome Center. Each one of them has a diversity center. They have different ones in the city. So, Littleton, Colorado, and many other cities were watching Hormel to see if they could actually take an all-white city and flip it over to multiculturalism. So this really was about color, right? But it was about corporate color. This was about, if you want to say it's racism, you could call it that, but they were going for the cheapest labor they could get. The lowest paid people that would do this work, and they wouldn't have to pay these high labors. So they created these 7 different groups. From these 7 different groups, they created the Welcome Center. Now, they took this $10 million and they leveraged it. 10 years ago, they leveraged it to $50 million. So this is a very well-oiled machine in Austin. And I've actually got printouts for you guys to take home with you. Well, we got an article after article in the newspaper from their words describing what they did, and they weren't afraid to put it out there in the public. And it was, but the public didn't want to, they weren't unaware of all this. when they did this, they got together with many different foundations, and many ones, one was called the Blandin Foundation. We're going to get into the Blandin because that's one of the biggest thing of the night tonight. Blandin Foundation created all these programs, and they went to over 300 communities in Minnesota so far. And the big news is they're converging here this month, and they're going to start doing what they did to Austin, to Winona, to Long Prairie, to Wilmer. They're going to do it to multiculturalize. They're going to do it to the cities now in this area starting at the end of this month. Plainview and Wabasha. At the end of this month, you guys are going to be hit real hard in about the next 2 years with multiculturalism. You're going to start to see a lot of different cultures move into Plainview and Wabasha because these people, and I got it in writing, I mean, what they do, and I've got the dates and everything of what they're about to do. So you guys are going to get hit real hard unless you know what's about to happen. So when they did this, they said, can we put this program together because they did this thing called Minnesota Nicer Now. It's called the Wild Foundation because they partnered with many foundations to do this. Anna Bremer Foundation, the Wild Foundation, the Ignite Foundation, the Bush Foundation. They all partnered together. They all had roles. And the Wild Foundation did a study called Minnesota Nicer Not. And they found out that Minnesota just was a little bit too coolish. They didn't think they would welcome all these new immigrants to this socialist program that they were going to put together. This is their words. They said, and I don't know, there's farmers here? No farmers? They believed that Minnesota and these areas down here, that they could pull this off because they felt the farmers were not very bright. That they wouldn't be able to have the know-it-all to contact lawyers and fight against this. And they felt that this community of farmers, not just the farmers themselves, they felt you all were kind of naive and kind of stupid. And so they figured they could pull this over your wool because you didn't have any access to lawyers and you were Minnesota nice. That was in writing and I got it in the print out here. So they pulled this off. So this went on for several years. And you could see what has happened in the area of Austin, Minnesota. Again, a test case for a lot of different cities. This is the P9 strike, and I just wanted to show you the P9 strike with all the different people. I don't even know how long it lasted, but it was a pretty tumultuous time.
5 6 months.
Is it 5 or 6 months?
I was there.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking. It's probably you on the screen up there. But anyways, they brought the National Guard down and so on and so forth. Orville ended up winning. They ended up getting cheap labor, and they continue to get the cheap labor. What you see there today for labor won't be there 5 years from now. At least a percentage of it won't be. A large percentage of it. Their revolving door is continuing because they never want this to happen again. They never want the wages to get that high again. They had 100% occupancy of real estate in Austin, and it's 100%. They had people working there for a generation after generation. Now it's 3 months, 6 months until they catch up. And then we actually have pictures on a Saturday afternoon every week. We have pictures of a bus that comes from Wayville, Texas, comes to right by the library there. There's a Mexican grocery store. A white bus comes in from Iowa. We actually have pictures of them dropping out the immigrants going into the, we've been there, going into the grocery store. If you go near the bus, you cannot go near the bus.
And Austin's a sanctuary city, too.
Yeah, well, they're
so
one of the four. They will
And Worthington is, too.
Yeah, that's one of the four.
Yeah.
So we have pictures of the bus. I actually called the bus company up and they said, oh, we never go to Austin. We have pictures of you there. So we have pictures of the bus. They said they come from Chicago to Austin. And once you follow the bus, they will go to the next town that has a meat processing plant. They call this the meat market circuit. Goes from Kentucky, goes around, and they drop these immigrant slaves, as we call them, right? Because that's what they are. Let's use it what it is. They drop them off. They use them for 3 months. They catch up to them. They pick them up, and they just move them around. They're seasonal workers. And the people behind them in the van, they do the paperwork to move these people from location to location. So this is an operation that's been going on for years, but I wanted to share that with you because what you're seeing here is what you're seeing throughout Minnesota, because after this happened in 1885, the wheels started turning in Minnesota. You started seeing a huge influx of people from different countries come here, from Mexico, Guatemala. It didn't matter. They were coming up here and they were going to different cities. Because why? Because Austin is the doorway for illegal immigration. And so was Worthington. That's the doorway. They get in the doorway. So once Hormel buys, they buy Wilmer, and the same thing happens. The same players with different names. When I go up there, they have the same players, different names. They use the same platform. They have the Welcome Center does. They have an immigration for you. They help you get your license. They help you get your not your license, but your paperwork in order. They help you with the housing. They help you get a job. In our world, in law, that's against the law. Under 1324 A, B, and C, 1, 2, and 3, that's actually illegal. First of all, it's illegal to transport people across state lines. That's human trafficking. Second of all, you can't transport people knowingly knowing that they're illegal and then go from one place to another. But I've talked to the mayors, I've talked to the chiefs of police, and they know what's going on. They can only go so far. And I actually have documents that state that, that they were in front of judges or testimony on how they were to handle this in cities. And at some points they just said, you know what, we don't have interpreters, we just pick them up if they're drinking and driving, we confiscate the cars, we let them go, and there's just a whole bunch of things they did because they didn't have the time or the resources to deal with. So that's what happened in here. So what happened after that is where you're starting to see an influx. It started filtering to Wilmer, it started going to Long Prairie, Worthington, and all these towns started getting nailed very quickly in the 90s after this happened. Because the door opened up. Because they were the ones who wrote the program on what? Slave labor, corporate labor. And they opened it up. In the 90s, they realized that, I just wanted to say this real quick. In Austin, the Minnesota overall 7.3 population is foreign-born, but in Austin it's 10.3. And in the population of foreign-born, is 17.3% who don't speak English in Austin, where the average is 10.7. So they're 7 points above the state average just in Austin. And lawful permanent residents pay more than the unauthorized immigrants in the state. So what you're noticing here is the people that are actually living in that city, they're paying so much more because they're the homeowners. They're the ones who pay the property bills, property taxes to keep these things going. And in fact, this just came out, so I added this. This just came out this past couple weeks, that they just got an increase in their property taxes of 15.69% this next year of property taxes. 15.69% in property taxes. And you're seeing this is how we saw it in California. Property taxes went through the roof because we have the highest cases of illegals of anybody in the country, right? So who gets nailed? The people, the residents. Nail the residents first, keep them going, and let everybody else get paid, and the corporations get the free labor, they get the cheap labor. But make sure you go after the residents first. Look at that. That's a big number. I don't know if you guys realize that's a huge number. And you're starting to know that, you're starting to see that in many cities that have high cases of immigrants, illegal immigrants. So what happened in the 90s, from 90 to 2000, you've seen an influx in all these cities. And so in Minnesota, and the Center of Rural Policy and Development said, hey, we're seeing a large influx. So they could have 50 in the city, had to be over 1,000 people. But they could have 50, and then it went to 100, and then they said, okay, we've got 100% increase. Like Lesueur has 1,000% increase. You know, and Sleepy Eye had 300, and so Austin had 327 increase from 1990 to 2000. You see the big increase of.
Maybe they're building a new fire station.
Oh, I'll try. Focus a little bit. I'll try.
It's new neighborhoods.
And I don't know how to work this very well.
But you just can't say that.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
What's that?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Another city up near me is getting hit really hard is Long Prairie. They're just getting nailed and no. There's just a lot of cities that are just getting nailed. But this is from 1990 to 2000. So the Center for Rural Policy and Development wanted to say, hey, wait a second, how come we're getting such an influx of immigrants coming here? We better look into this. So they contacted, again, what did they do? They contacted who? The foundations, right? The foundations that put together all these different programs in Austin. They contacted the Otter River Foundation, Southwest Minnesota Foundation, the Blue Cross Foundation, And they contacted all these people and they started getting studies and they said, okay, we could take advantage of this, we could make this work for us, we could diversify Minnesota because we're getting so much. Because why? They said in Austin, Minnesota, Bonnie Reed said, hey, we have an aging culture, the baby boomers are going out. We need to do what they call the great replacement. They want to get rid of the European culture and replace it with corporate culture. So they said, okay, we'll look at this and we'll see this. And so they contacted all the city. They call it snowballing at the time. They contacted one and they tried to see how many were in their city, what programs they have. Well, then once that got settled into place and they saw, okay, we got all this in place, we know all the statistics, now we need to get somebody that can run this program and diversify Minnesota. At first they wanted to do what they call Reconquista. Now different cultures wanted to take over Minnesota. In the 80s it was called Reconquista because that's what we had. That primary 80s and 90s we had a large population of Spanish. And they believed that they could call Minnesota the Upper Aztlan because they wanted to take away, being in California and I have living in Hispanic culture, I mean, I know these people very well and I love them and they're friends of mine, but I learned a lot from them. And Reconquista is they want their 5 states back. But they also wanted to they wanted to make Minnesota the Upper Aztlan. Well, as time went, other cultures started coming in, and then that kind of phased out. But then they contacted the Blandin Foundation out of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and this Blandin Foundation got involved and started creating what they call Partners in Leadership Program. Now, is anybody in here Blandin? Because every time I seem to have a large group, there's always a Blandin person that gets upset because this hits home. So Blandin leadership people, they take leaders of the community, they ask them to apply, and once you apply, they take a Myers-Briggs test. You have to have a psychological test. Now, if this is community-wide organizing, why do you need to take a psychological test for Myers-Briggs? Once they do this, it costs $96,000 and they underwrite it, it's $4,000 per person. They send you to the Sugar Lake Lodge in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, to be orientated in how to take over and do basically what Austin did, how to be community-wide organizers, to diversify your city, to put all these programs like the Welcome Center, all these different programs into play. All of this is done on human rights, and we're going to get into why that word is extremely important. So we're going to be talking a lot about the Blandin Foundation in a minute. So I'm going to show you how this works. So I gave you an idea of how it works, or what happened in communities. Now I'm going to show you how it works. This is by no means a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is both. Both are to blame, both are involved, both are using corporations, and we seem to get pulled apart from each other because we keep thinking, there's a problem here. You go to your Christmases, you go to everybody gets upset, right? This isn't about that. This is about how it works. And you need to understand this because if you don't, you're going to get buried into this, and nobody's right and nobody's wrong. You just need to understand.
So is this a globalist thing, basically, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's the globalist UN deal is what's pushing this.
Now you just answered my next question.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody know how to play chess? No. Okay. I'm going to teach you chess, but I'm going to change the words. I'm going to change the words of chess. You see there are 2 boards here, right? Two sides. 2 sides that always oppose. This is the way, this game has been around for 1,500 years. Okay? So two sides that are totally opposition view, but one side has to win. The king always wins. No matter which side it is, the king wins, doesn't it? It's checkmate. But, okay, so how this game works is we're going to change the name. These are the pawns, and the pawns can only go in one position. We call pawns, they protect the king and the queen. They protect them. And they go out and they do the foot traffic to try to get out, and they're the soldiers. We're going to call them, in this game of chess, we're going to rename them, we're going to call them community-wide organizers. All right? These are community-wide organizers. Now, this guy right here is the rook. The rook is one of the most important players in the game because the rook can go the whole distance from national, international, or state, international, and international. State, national, and international. It can go either way of the board. It can't go this way. It can only go this way and that way. We're going to call that one foundations. Foundations are the ones who get the money and the grant money to put these programs together in your city. They get the grant money from it. Some of these foundations are 97% funded by the federal government, which means they're called nonprofits, but really they're working for the federal government because why? They get 97% of funding from the federal government. So in essence, they're federal government profiteers. And this one here is the knight, and the knight can only go here, and here, or here, and here. It can only go within the parameters that it's given. Okay, it can't go very far. It can only protect a small area. We're going to call that one a politician. Okay? We're going to call that a politician because a politician can only stay within its boundaries of the constitutional law, right? It can't go outside unless it was maybe a president. We're going to call this a local politician. It can only go within inside its area. The third one here, in the game of chess, is called the bishop. The bishop can go do what the rook or the foundations can't. Foundations go this way and this way, passing out money. The rook is a bishop. We're going to call this the churches, right? The bishops. What do you choose bishops? They can go and they're the morality people. They're the ones that tell you everything's a moral issue. Well, we got to let these people across the board because it's a moral issue. It's not having nothing to do with law. No, it's all about feelings. This is a feeling guy, right? It's all about feelings. So this guy here gets his money from the foundations, and it can only go this way or this way. It does what the foundations can't do. It gets money from the foundations, and it even gets money from the government, but it can only go, and it spreads a message of morality or of an ideology. The third one, or the fourth one here is the queen. The queen's the most powerful position player on the game, and the queen can do everything everybody can do, pretty much. It protects the king, but it can go in any different direction, and that's the most powerful. And we're going to call that one the churches. Okay? And then next to that is the king, right behind here, the king. And the king is the most useless tool on the board. Because the king can't really do anything but move one position to the next. He has to be protected all the time. So the king is an ideology. An ideology. We're going to have this ideology, and we're going to run this city with an ideology. We're going to run this country with an ideology. Whether it's Republican or Democrat, whether it's Christian or Islam, it doesn't matter. It's an ideology. But we must protect the ideology. And the whole board is protecting that ideology, isn't it? You got the foot traffic here going out here passing out literature saying, hey, this is the ideology. They're on the street corners. They're coming to your doors. This is what we want. We want diversity. We want gun rights. We want abortion. We don't, whatever. They're the ones passing out the literature. But they don't really, these are useful idiots. They can die at any point. I mean, they're just useful. The rest of them can get rid of them. They're your immigrants, right? They're disposable. They're round table. They're just disposable people. But we have to protect these guys here as we go. So I want you to, those are the movements and those are the players. And understand, as we talk here, this is exactly what's happening in the United States. Remember that as I go through here, I will describe what the rooks and the pawns are doing as we go. So you guys all heard of, most of you probably never heard of Agenda 21, right? Agenda 21? Some people have heard it, some haven't. This is a worldwide phenomenon going on. It was written in 1992 at the World Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and there was over 178 heads of state from all the countries in the world gathered together, over 50,000 delegates gathered together. And they came up with an idea that we can all group together, like you saw on the chessboard, instead of two people fighting against them, that they're going to unite together. They're going to have one entity, one government, one religion, one everything, And they're going to unite this together. And this is so well, there are books, and we got documents, you can watch thousands of videos. We got executive orders from our presidents that wrote on this. This is alive and well, and I'm going to show you all these orders in just a minute.
This is when George Bush Sr. started.
Right, I'll get to that, yeah. So,
Actually, it was back in 1920 or so.
1992.
No, back in the 1920s, the scientists started talking about global.
Yeah, but that's true.
Back in the 1920s.
That they did, that's true.
Scientists.
And in 1962, they also talked about global freezing. Because they're constantly changing. They went from global warming to global
They have more
freezing.
data now than they used to.
They switch it. But anyways, this is what they said. The think tank out of the United Nations got together, and this is it's called the Club of Rome, very big, powerful think tank out of the United Nations said, it's searching for a new enemy to unite us. That's these two right here. It's searching for a new enemy to unite us. We came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortage, famine, and the likes would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. So they use the earth because one thing that everybody will unite around is the earth. Because if you don't have the earth, you don't have your rights to stand on it, right? So everybody united around this, and they used that global warming, according to the people who wrote this was not real, this was false. They came right out of the United Nations global agenda. The guy who helped write it, Maurice Strong, the founder of TWO, died last year. He was up for crimes of humanity, hiding out in China. He tried to take over the water supply in the United States, the largest water supply in the United States. In the 1980s, he got caught with a guy named Nakashoki. He got caught, the environmentalists caught him.
What water supply was that?
I don't know the exact.
Because that would be Lake Superior, that's
No.
the biggest water supply.
Ogallala Reservoir, I think.
Yeah, the biggest water supply
So-
is Lake Superior.
They were going to block it out. I don't actually know the name, and I should know the name. So anyways, Maurice Strong partnered up with a lady named Gro Brundtland, a socialist of the World Socialist Party, head of Norway 3 times. He partnered up with her. And he says, isn't it the only hope for the planet that industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? So now Maurice Strong was a capitalist. Gro Brundtland was a socialist. Nothing wrong being socialist, most of the world's socialists anyway, so that's what they believe in. But they believe that they had to destroy capitalist society in order to make agenda come around. Again, there are books, and I'm going to show you this. So they believe that they should destroy the capitalist society, which would be the United States, Germany, and many of the capitalist society. Because why? Because we use too much fossil fuels here. We use too much, and we need to take that our profits because we're too rich and disperse them, and called redistribution of wealth. You probably heard of that. And they wanted to redistribute the wealth to the rest of the world. That was the whole idea behind this, because they wanted to raise the rest of the world up that were in poverty, raise them up and bring us down, and everybody would be on the same utopia as the earth. The earth has as much rights as the people and as animals, rocks, stones, trees. They wanted to make everybody and everything on an even level. One God, one religion, one army. So, as you can see, this is Maurice Strong, died last year, hiding out in China. You ever heard of the oil for food scandal? That was him.
Yeah.
Okay, that was him. And then Gro Brundtland, World Socialist Party right there. Now she wrote what the word sustainability means. So when everybody says to you, I don't know what sustainability means, because you'll hear a lot of mayors say it has different meanings. The meaning is sustainable development. Remember this because I'm going to bring this up later. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. That's the word by United Nations Agenda 21. That is the definition, because that's very important that you know that. So, Agenda 21, as I said, it was written in 1982 of 50,000 delegates. It was brought in by those two by a book called Our Common Future. They wrote it in 1987, and they brought it to the World Earth Summit. Those two individuals we just saw. They brought it in and they created this book called Agenda 21. It's a 40-chapter book. This is a soft treaty. Our common future was a soft treaty. This book was a soft treaty. It really meant nothing in the United States. But in 1992, every country in Rio de Janeiro at that time, including the United Nations, signed on to this, Agenda 21, to be a one-world government. Under the environmentalists, George Bush Sr. was the president at that time, and he signed on to this globalist idea. So as I said, this isn't a Democrat-Republican thing, is it? We got a Republican that signed on to a socialist idea to bring it to the United States. When it gets to the United States, he does not win the presidency. He does in '93. Bill Clinton wins the presidency, and he immediately signs on to the Presidential Council of Sustainability. Again, this is a soft treaty. It meant nothing until Bill Clinton becomes president and signs an executive order. If he would not have signed this executive order and signed this up with the United Nations, the things that you see today in the United States would not be existing. As far as the global warming issues, the immigration issues, and so on and so forth, he brings it to the United States and he writes the executive order. This is the book that we feel that the Republicans, Democrats sided together as two kings. They sided together and they are destroying your liberties. Because remember, if you look up in the biodiversity program, it says that property rights are not sustainable. They need to take your property away from you. Property means that you have too much. They need to take that away from you because the earth is the earth and we basically control you. The government will control you.
This is all being pushed by the Rothschilds and the Federal.
Well, I'm not going to go that far, but a lot of people could say it. Yeah.
They're the ones pushing it. They're the ones that are buying all these politicians.
They shouldn't build the wall because they're gonna take all those people's property along
I
the
don't
southern
think
border.
the wall's ever going to get built anyway. So that's a side.
But you're not defending the argument.
What's
You're,
it?
you're saying that the wall's not gonna be built, doesn't defend the argument against what I just said.
No, I'm not.
In order to build this so-called wall, they have to go and take away all these people's
Well,
property.
she brought a good point up. I like that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
no,
I mean,
that's a great point.
You're like
I'll-
contradicting
No,
yourself.
I'm not. I'll finish it up. I'll finish the conversation. Okay, so she just walked right into my argument. When the government puts a barrier, right? It's called the Wetlands Project or many other different things. This thing is very, very complex. Wetlands Project is part of it. When you put a government structure or you own a government piece of property or you have an area that has wildlife like an endangered species on it, it now becomes under the United Nations Environmental Program under human rights because everybody's equal, right? So when you put a structure or an area that is protected, it now has what they call buffer zones. It now belongs to the United States government and there's a buffer zone that goes all around that structure. We can only go certain points of it. So you'll notice that in Minnesota, they are now making more and more land, especially up in northern Minnesota. It's called the Teddy Roosevelt Act. They're making land that you cannot go beyond that of 1858. 1858, that land has to go back to what it was before Minnesota became a state. That's called the Teddy Roosevelt Act. So when you've got these buffer zones and they're connecting these buffer zones and these places that the United States buys up or takes over from eminent domain, it's called the Wetlands Project, whether it be lakes or ponds or whatnot under the DNR or whatever. They put a buffer zone around that, and the only way to use those areas is to use them through corridors. That's why you're seeing bike trails, walking trails. You're seeing these go up all over the country because they're putting buffer zones. So the answer to your question is, yes, once the United States buys that land or gets that land, there is a buffer zone around that area, which is part of Agenda 21. That's a good argument because you're exactly right, because that is exactly what's happening. The government will then take that as eminent domain, and that is Agenda 21, taking your land from you. That's a good argument. I'm glad you brought that up. Once they brought that to the United States, or once they signed on to the executive order under Bill Clinton, they had to make this into an action plan. And the action plan was growing smart. You'll notice that everything's smart cities, smart telephones, smart TVs, all that stuff. That's growing smart. So they turned this into an action plan and they're using it at local levels. And they're just about everything you do from bike pathways, I'm gonna get into that. All that stuff is under this program. And so they've got it put in at every single level. Agenda 21, again, soft treaty until Bill Clinton signs it in order. The United Nations Comprehensive, this is what they call it, the United Nations Comprehensive Blueprint. Remember I said that because that's really important. Comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. They have to reorganize how you think in your school, your education, Common Core, all those things. They're re-educating you. You know, you can't have cursive writing. They're taking arms off of clocks now because, you know, they're just going to go by numbers. Everything's going by easy. They're going to reorganize how you think. They're going to reorganize what you eat. As again, I said, buffer zones of where you can go and opt out. All this is documented. So this is the comprehensive blueprint. You can pull this up. It's called sustainable development. You can always hear that they call these sustainable cities. This is the blueprint that they use. So what we're going to focus on, there are 17 different goals. And they want to end world poverty, nothing wrong with that. There's some things in here that there's nothing wrong with. I mean, I like parkways and I like different things. I like them to beautify things up and so on. But there's nothing wrong with a lot of this stuff. But it's when government gets involved and takes over is where I don't like it. So if you look over here, this is gender equality. Because remember, everybody has to be equal. There's nobody above one another. So no matter what you are, what you're feeling, what you feel today, are you a boy or a girl? It doesn't really matter. That is gender equality. This one here is about smoking. You notice that there's a lot of cities doing this tobacco thing in 21. If you look up that in Agenda 21, that's actually in there. If you look at, we're going to concentrate on this one, 10 and 11, because 10 and 11 is the amount of money that people are making, especially immigrants and refugees, and the amount of money they're shipping out of the country. It's called redistribution of wealth. And this is the sustainability cities. This is what we're talking about tonight. This is where they're bringing in the people. There's books and books and chapters on how they bring in like 4.2 and how they bring in these immigrants and what programs they have to put into place. This is all written in number 11. So we're going to concentrate mostly on these two because those are the two that have to do with your money and those have to do with the immigrants and the refugees. This is all written into a blueprint all the way to the UN. And so we went from the national, so I'm going to go over here in just a second. So to understand this, you understand the United Nations Environmental Program has different levels. You have the international, the national, the state, the regional, the local, and then the city, the stakeholders, and then the NGOs. So each one of them have a level. Each one of them have a document of comprehensive reform. Every one of them have their own books that they have to go by, and they all follow. Now, if I'm looking in Australia, if I'm looking in Italy, or if I'm looking in Dubai, they all follow the same comprehensive program. There is no difference. If I pull up another country, they have the same comprehensive program that we have here. They're all running off the same agenda.
Good.
So the international program is where they wrote the agenda, and these are called those 17 charts up there I just showed you, those are called SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals. Those are the SDGs. They are then handed down to the national, and that's where President Clinton signs on to the Presidential Council of Sustainability. And that is what they call the comprehensive blueprint. It then goes to the state, they do the legislation, but they also have a state comprehensive blueprint that they have to follow. And then it goes to the regional, and the regional is where we have 11 regions in Minnesota, and each region maybe have 5 or 10, up to 20 counties in each region. And then these regional developers, who are not elected people, by the way, nobody elected them, and we're going to get into that. This is the crux of everything. These are not elected people forcing the agenda, applying for grants, and then going back to your city councils and your politicians with the grant money, with the carrot attached to it, that sustainability has to be tied to the agenda.
Big
And then
money.
you go to the locals, which is a city, and they find what they call the Green Steps program. Has anybody ever heard of the Minnesota Green Steps program?
Yeah.
Minnesota Green Steps is what's running all of your cities along with the American Planning Association. They're running this program. This is the one I think we need to really get rid of along these two. The Green Steps program is non-elected people too. So when you get to this level, we're starting to work with people that were not elected. So if you have an issue with you're a farmer, and you have an issue with tiling, well, the regional, you're a farmer, you have an issue with tiling in your field, they probably set this up in 4 counties that this is the way we're going to set up tiling and this is the rules and laws. But if you go back to your councilman or your county commissioner and you ask them, hey, what about this? They'll always refer you back to the regional development, the people that were not elected. So you never, ever can go back to the person you elected into office because they always go to an outside source. These are non-elected. This is your invisible government that's running your city and state. And then you got the stakeholders, and this is what's called private-public partnership. And that is the crux of all, and in the cities. The city partnered up with the foundations, they partnered up with the city, and they partnered up with the state, and many people are pushed out to the side because many corporations, big builders, can get grants to build a project where a lot of smaller people can't. So these PPPs kind of pushed everybody out. And the NGOs are your welcoming cities or your inclusive cities resolution, which you've seen those. They just passed an inclusive cities resolution in St. Cloud and Wilmer and Winona, Austin. They all passed these welcoming cities resolutions. If you go on the computer, everything that I tell you, everything has what they call a toolkit. So if I want to know anything, I just go United Nations toolkit on welcoming cities, and a whole toolkit will come up. United Nations on PPP, a whole toolkit will come up. Anything that I want to know, whether I want to know about multicultural gardens, or maybe the access to a sidewalk, there's a toolkit for it. It's all written at the United Nations. Everything you do from the moment you eat, the moment you wake up, from the food you drink, the food you eat, the water you drink, the air you breathe, all has a toolkit. Your whole life is being mapped out from these guys brought down. And this does not work, by the way. It never works if these people don't go along with the program at the city level. It does not go. It doesn't work. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try to figure out, tell you people how to stop it at your city level. Because it's snowballed so fast that half the state's already been taken over. But you guys, as I said, in 1 month, you are the next on the, who's in Plainville? Anybody in Plainville here? Plainville? Any in Wabasha? Okay, you guys are the next on the train. You're the next to be rode over, and I'm going to show you how this works. So once these stakeholders, non-elected people, remember they are non-elected people, are going to come into your city and they're going to take it over. And I'll show you. Now, how did it go from the international level to the national level to the city, or to the state? Right?
So these really aren't, they aren't city bureaucrats or nothing, they're state bureaucrats, they're just people that brought in.
Yeah, well, I'll show you. I'm going to show you that.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did it go from the international to the national to the city? Well, in 1993, a Republican named Arnie Carlson signs on to this agreement. Remember I told you it's not a Republican-Democrat issue? Arnie Carlson sold you guys out in 1993, okay? So he goes on and he said, and in his article, and you can pull this article up, anybody can pull this up. It's called Sustainability Minnesota. Just type in Arnie Carlson. This is the whole thing. And he goes in and he talks about how he raves about what he did and what he was programmed with. In this article, he says that he went off the platform of the Earth Summit. This is from the Minnesota plan. So if you don't think this is in Minnesota, that's in the Minnesota plan. The United Nations Rio de Janeiro and 180 nations met at the World Earth Summit. It says that their mission plan was called the Agenda 21 on the Presidential Council Sustainability, which Bill Clinton signed into law.
Good.
Blueprint for action, public-private partners, public-private efforts as national, state, and local levels. Now he signed that into law.
Good.
So once this was taken over and now goes to the local, it goes from the state to down. So now you know where it came from, and you know what? To Bob, what about it? Bob. So, you know what, and some people here, here's the deal. To some people, a social, this is a great idea. There's nothing, there's nothing wrong. If you like this, there's nothing wrong with this. This is who you are. If you don't like people having property, you want to take your property away from them, you want to live in stack and pack housing, this is you. I'm not gonna get, I don't want it, I want my freedom, right? I want to be able to own a house, but that's me. So Artie Carlson says that he brings it over, and in the efforts to, no, this is really interesting because this is his words. He says, in the effort to shift government's role. Now you guys, what does that mean? To shift, what's government do? Governments write laws, protect the laws, obey the laws. They govern the laws. But he says, an effort to shift government's rule. Then he also says, in part from enforcer, and what does the enforcer do? The enforcer enforces the laws, right? He said, from enforcer to catalyst. And what does the word catalyst mean? Catalyst. A catalyst is an event or a person causing change. Okay, you may like this idea, what he's doing, but remember, here's the deal. I don't care how you think or how you feel. It never was voted by the people. Okay, so how you feel about this is irrelevant because it was never passed by the people. This is an illegal program put onto you, bypassing the Congress, bypassing the government, and this is an illegal siege of your property, and he's telling you that we're going to reorganize this state the way he's designed to do it. So he brings it over through the United Nations. And then he goes on to say, made up of 30 businesses. This is where I get into the slave labor, right? It's made up of 30 businesses, environmental and community leaders appointed by Governor Carlson. Why is that important? Because Tim Walz just got elected governor, right? Right? He never, everybody knows he never would have made the governor for the Congress the second time. He was way down the poll. He got in there and he won this. But he also just signed on to his task force of 29 different groups, and he has 30 and he has 29, so they're following the same agenda. They both have two task forces, but the difference between these two, they both followed Agenda 21, didn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican.
Right.
They both, but if you notice, Artie Carlson played the side of a lot of businesses because it was in its early stages and the environment used some foundations to reorganize the people and human thought in Minnesota to take you over. As he says, they said, the people that are the unintelligent farmers, I'm not saying that's just a quote. We know that's not true because why? Because the Minnesota is ranked the second most millionaires per capita in the United States, right? So he goes on here. Now here's the difference. We've got a capitalist using corporations. I looked up all the lists yesterday and some foundations. Then Tim Walz comes up and brings up 29 of these groups, and every single one of them, and I'm going to get into this, every single one of them is a foundation or one mayor, and every one of them is extremely progressive. So he doesn't even go to the business side of it, he goes to the other side of it. He doesn't put business into the picture. He goes to the human rights or the agenda of what? Of the comprehensive plan of the United Nations. If he succeeds in what he is doing, Minnesota and you, because he said he's going to work on the outstates of Minneapolis, St. Paul. Why would he do that? Because Minneapolis, St. Paul voted for him at 73.5% in Hennepin and Ramsey County. The rest of the state as a whole voted at 48%. 73.5%. There's 5.3 million people in Minnesota. 2.6 of them live in Minneapolis. 1.2 of them voted, which is not, in logical sense, those numbers don't even add up. But 1.2 voted just in 2 counties alone. They landslotted the whole state. So if you look at the state, the only thing they got to write on is Minneapolis-St. Paul. But he knows that he's got Minneapolis-St. Paul locked up, so now he's got to work on the rest of the state. And that's why he's working on these outstate foundations to pass all these programs. 16 years voting, felonies to vote, and so on and so on. He's working really heavily in the Indian tribes. But he's not really working on the businesses. He's using the environmental program of the agenda of the United Nations. So, as you can see, and it says, if you look at, if you don't agree with what Arnie Carlson, this is not the United Nations, he quotes right at the bottom, support the laws, changes aimed at helping Minnesotans meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Where did you see that before? That was Grover Brutman, World Socialist Party, Agenda 21. He quotes in his article, Agenda 21, the socialist program, and he uses these. Now, these are the names, and this is the names, I don't really care about if you see this or not, but this is all the names of Arnie Carlson's, and he really only uses one in the area here, which is Olmsted County, which is Gene Michaels, Olmsted County Commissioner. That's the only one I can see that's out in this area. But he uses primarily businesses and so on and so forth. So, I kind of got you a layout of how it was brought to the United States and how it was brought down to Minnesota.
You explained why we're in the mess we are.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Yeah, that's right.
But the thing about this is that I can prove everything I say. And it's not even my words. So how does this work? How do you be able to take a non-elected official or the people didn't vote for something, and how do you make that apply in your city but it wasn't even passed, right? How does that work? Okay, I'll give you an example. If a school was to be built in this area, all you homeowners, would you have the right to have a vote whether you wanted to have your taxes raised on your homes to build the school?
Yes.
Yeah, you would have a right. So whether your taxes are going to raise, you all have a right. Okay, because that's in your town, and this is what it's going to cost you. When it comes to refugee resettlement, it is a commodity because we took them out of the countries that they're at. We stole them, brought them over here. We feed them, clothe them, house them. That's also a commodity, isn't it? But you didn't have a voice in that, did you? You had no voice in that whatsoever. Because they know you never would have accepted this. So how do you get by a program like this without people disagreeing with you? Well, you have to do one thing only. You have to bypass the 10th Amendment. You have to bypass the Bill of Rights. Because the people would never accept this. So how do you bypass the Constitution? How do you bypass the Article 6, Section 1, which is the free law of the land? How do you bypass it? The only way you can make this program work is you have to go to an invisible government, an outside source, to be able to put programs into play without you ever being able to argue. So, the State Department brings in a whole bunch of refugees, and they bring them onto the state, and then you say to your mayor, hey, why are we having all these problems? And I want to know the audits, I want to know how much this is costing. Your mayor says, I don't have it. It's a government issue. You go to your state senators, it's a federal issue. You go to your congressman, it's a federal issue, even though the congressman has the power of the purse, right? Article 6, Section 8, he has the power of the purse. Then you go to your governor, he tells me right to my face, if you don't like it, you get the hell out of the country, out of the state, right? He said that's a federal issue. So I have no representation in this whatsoever, but yet I'm taxed on that in my own community and my own county. I'm taxed on something, and what does it say in the tax code? Taxation without representation. You have to have a representation when you're taxed on something. That's the law. But they won't tell you how much it costs you to have this program in the play. So how do they do it? How do they put this in play in your state and your city? The State Department bypasses the people, gives the authority to 9 VOLAs, voluntary agencies or contractors. They contract for the federal government. These agencies are paid very lucrative dollars. And in some cases, I'm going to show you a chart, in some cases 97 to 98% of their money comes from the federal government. Your tax dollars. So is that humanitarianism, if they say that they're doing this for humanitarian reasons? No, it's not, because they're getting our taxpayers' dollars.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
You know, this is a good point you're making about the taxation without representation. I mean, I completely agree with that. But there are books, you know, there's bookkeeping. And so if you go and look at the bookkeeping and have outside auditors come in and look at that,
good point.
It will show where the money is going.
Great point again.
When do we get to see the books?
So here's what happens. So she just brought up, so we tried to do this, right? In St. Paul, we went to our
Never
county
get to see it.
commissioners. They did a whole PowerPoint. Nope, can't do it. Would not do it. We went to the city council. It went national. Went national with Jeff Johnson.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it. We went to the state. They won't do it. They won't give you the numbers.
Yeah.
You know why they won't give you the numbers? They don't have it, because secondary migration is killing Minnesota. That's right. They don't know. They actually don't know until 2020 census even how many people are even here. So they don't have the numbers. We can't get it out of it.
You gotta keep going after it. Yeah, keep going. This girl right here, she went through the she went after the school
we've
board.
had multiple people, city council members, state representatives. We have tried everything to get these numbers. And
Minnesota
they
hides
refuse to do an audit for us. And this has been going on for 2 years. It's hit now, it's been in the front page of Minneapolis Star Tribune on what we've been trying to do, and we're getting nowhere. It's a good point, though. Again, we ain't getting it. So how do they do that? They have to bypass the people. They have to give the authority to what? They have to give the authority to foundations, non-government organizations. So if you have an argument about how many refugees are in your city, well, they say we don't know because Luther Social Services is handling it. We go to Luther Social Services meetings and they block us out. They won't even let us in the door. We actually have a picture of that with the gardener. They won't even let us in the door. Yet they have quarterly meetings. They won't even give us the information. I sat down with them though. I did get a private meeting with them, and they have no idea. They say it's out of our hands. It's a federal issue. All we're doing is just facilitating this. So they put them in the power. Your politicians say they have no authority over this. The NGOs say they only facilitate it, so the government's still in control. Taxation without representation. That's how they did this. They bypassed the people, and they taxed you on something that you can't have anything to do or argue with.
That's what's so great about this government shutdown. You know why? Because they're shutting down all the food stamps.
And the Transportation Safety Administration.
So when we look at this is a small, a really tiny little, because we're talking, how many foundations are in the United States? 1.5 million foundations in the United States. They're little, they're big, they're international, national, local. So you start off with the United Nations Environmental Program. This is the guy who puts it into play, that guy moving, he hands it off to Gutierrez. He's now head of the United Nations. Bill Clinton signs it in the executive order. And this is the executive order right here. If anybody if they don't believe that this is happening, this is the executive order. EO 12852. He signed it into order. If now after he did that, what did he do? He creates what? What did he create? The Clinton Foundation. Why? Because they went outside and they started bringing in, and they partnered up with UNESCO, which the United States, Trump just said enough with UNESCO. He dumped them about 3 months ago and said we're done with you because they're human rights issues. Turmoil, they got their hands caught in the cookie jar there is, but they're probably going to fall. Then it gets handed down to the National League of Cities, which goes to the League of Cities, which is every city in Minnesota, and they get handed off to the Welcoming American groups, where if you sign on to the Inclusive Cities Resolution or the Welcoming Cities Resolution, they hand it off to these guys, you pay fees, and then they go in and they bring in the human rights issues. Just remember, all these SDGs you see up there, 90% of that has to do with human rights. Okay? So these are your foundations. They're the ones that are running the show, but they're only getting their marching orders from the people up above. And it says here, the Agenda 21 proposes an array of actions intended to be implemented by every person on earth. Remember I said, it doesn't matter what country you're in. This same program is in every country. So, the blueprint is, this is how it works. I'm going to keep showing you how it works until you all figure it out here. So, the Agenda 21, Bill Clinton signs on to the Presidential Council of Sustainability. The United Nations organizations that wrote the Agenda 21 converged on the United States federal agencies, EPA, HUD, and Department of Transportation, to write the grants with strings attached. When you get a grant when a city gets a grant or a regional gets a grant, they all have strings attached to them that says sustainability. If the word is sustainability, that means it's tied to the United Nations. Almost no grant. There are some that you get, very few. There are some, but almost all of these are tied. Otherwise, your foundation's not going to get any money, so they don't get it. So they converge on these agencies, and they come down and they go to the state and sustainability planning, the state and local level. And then they work with America's Planning Association, which is run by who? The American Progressive Planners. Okay, so that should tell you right there who these guys are. And then Italy works right along with the United Nations. They are in every city. They help write the Green Steps program, which is in all the cities in Minnesota. Or not all the cities, but the Minnesota Green Steps program. And they help write that. These are probably, if you had to say, the most catalyst, the ones for change, these two are probably the worst of all anybody that we see.
Okay.
in there. So that's all. So if you don't do that, and let's say you take a grant and you don't stick to the rules and regulations of that grant, they can take that grant money away from you and they can sue you. They can sue the city and take the grant money away. So that's how that works. So if a city doesn't take a grant, or let's say that the city was somewhat bold, but they wanted to back out of it. Well, here's what happens. Should a community or state refuse to participate voluntarily, local chapters of NGOs are trained to go into action. They begin to pressure city councils and county commissioners to accept the grants and implement the policy. Should they meet resistance, they begin to issue news releases telling the community their elected officials are losing millions of dollars for the community. The pressure continues until the grant is finally taken and the policy becomes law. So if you wanted to put maybe a park in your city, the only way to get that park is to get a grant maybe from the Rochester Minnesota Foundation or Cornell Foundation. But you refuse because there's sustainability ties to this. They'll go to the newspapers, and the newspapers will call you a racist club because you have a bunch of people from over the border that like one particular sport, like soccer. Now you become a racist. They attack you for the racial aspect of this, and they will attack you that the city is losing money, and they will go at full board why these city officials are rubber stamping. And when I say rubber stamp, they're not the ones that got the grant. The NGO got the grant and sold it out to the city council. The city council probably just didn't say they didn't want it or they took it. So I'll do you another way. The regulators, the DOT, the Department of Transportation, the EPA, the regulators, they hook up with the State Department. They go to the stakeholders, which is the big businesses. Remember I told you Waltz and Arnie Carlson went to 30 of the big businesses or 30 of the foundation. They work with them. They then go to the county and the city and the regional, and they work with the nonprofits, and they get the federal money. And this is how they do it. They work around you. None of this is voted on. Has anybody in here ever voted that, hey, we're going to get grant money from Cornell Foundation? No. Nobody's ever voted on it.
No.
Because this is all done behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Everything is done in the back door. And then they come in, they'll say, hey, big news release. We just got millions of dollars. We want to build a new YMCA and this and that. We're going to get $150,000 from this grant. And the whole city goes, oh my God, this is wonderful. You guys are God. Well, they didn't do it. They just rubber stamped it. They just got it from the foundations.
Right.
But the strings were attached to that. As the strings get broken, things happen.
Austin's a perfect example of that, because they've been doing that like crazy over there.
Where?
On Austin, the
Oh, no,
foundation.
that's
the
they're
foundation,
the leader.
Once Jordy and those guys died off, and they got all that money of those guys, and they're spending on Austin to make it, it's all
Oh, I
part
know,
of the game.
they got $250,000 for a soccer field. I mean, I can just go on for 40 years.
They got so much
That's why
money.
that's why they raise their taxes up 16%.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's, these are your 501c4s. Now, you guys know the difference between a 501c3 and a 501c4? These are foundations at the higher levels, they get grants. A 501c3 cannot lobby, or not supposed to, lobby with the federal government. They could go out and disperse money like the Santa Claus and put programs in your town, and they can do a lot of different stuff. But they can't really sit at the table with your politicians. But a 501c4 can. A 501c4 could sit right there at the United Nations level, write policy, put that policy into play, and then work right with your politicians, and then they could write it up, the politicians rubber stamp it, and then it goes through. That's the difference. These guys could actually write policies, and they're not even elected. They're not elected people. Okay, so there's what you're seeing this, and this is the one they worked at the United Nations level and converged their way down. So I'm bringing this home to you, I'm getting closer. So in Rochester, I just went back one page, you notice that this one here, the Environmental Defense Fund, well, Rochester brings in a college recruit, a college graduate, and he comes in here and he creates this program and laid down the foundation for establishing a sustainability office. Where does that come from, right? The Agenda 21 for Rochester position, the city for a smart growth. What's smart growth? Smart growth is smart streets, smart highways, smart house, smart meters, smart telephones. He goes in and he starts to build because you guys, for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, are not smart enough to figure your way around the city. And this young kid, 22 years old, is going to come in and teach you that you weren't smart enough in your past. Technology is the way to go around your city. So
empty buses.
Now, if you look at the money that these foundations made, just in 2008,
Empty buses,
they made what?
real smart.
That number right there. And look at what their income is. 122 million.
So when did they bring him in? What year? What year
This
is
is
it?
his past year.
Oh, this past
Yep.
year. So he just knew.
Yep, he's new. So this is what they call smart meters. So what they're going to do, remember, Agenda 21 is primarily about carbon footprints. You're driving too much, you're using too much electricity, you're using too much water. If you use too much water, they're going to regulate you. If you use too much, in the state of Oregon, they're now taxing you for every mile that you drive. Did you know that? If I drive 20 miles, I'm taxed per mile. If I smoke too much cigarettes, you're taxed on a cigarette, right? Heavily. So that's what they're doing. They're taxing you, and they're going to start taxing you on how much water you usage, and it's all going to be determined by these smart meters that they're putting in your house. Have you ever heard of Alexa? That new thing they're putting in cars, and it's on TV all the time right now. Alexa, turn on my telephone. I'll be home in 15 minutes. Turn on my water. Alexa, I need to take a shower. Turn the shower on. Well, Alexa is now monitoring you, and it's knowing how much water, what time you leave your house, what time you come home. Did you leave your electricity on all day? Are you a pig in using your electricity? Are you using too much of a carbon footprint? Are you driving too far? You know, it's just all that every time you do this and you get onto Alexa, smartphones, smart TVs, all that stuff, they're monitoring your footprint. Every time you get, anybody got a smartphone in here? I will never have a smartphone. Ever. Because they're monitoring you. I will never. I'll just never. So this is what they're doing in all these cities like Rochester. Again, they're trying to take away your driving habits. You drive too much. That's why they're doing stack and pack housing. In these houses, you'll notice all these complexes going up, and below that they have a theater, and they have a restaurant, and they have a park in the middle, and all that, and a playground. That's all stack and pack. They're trying to get you to move to the inner city and move off the rural land. Because why? Because 50% of the land has to go back to its natural state. That's according to Agenda 21. So get it. And also, According to the agenda, 55% right now of the GDP comes from the inner city. They're trying to get that to 80%, trying to get everybody to move to the inner city because the GDP, they want to get it up to 80% of the GDP. GDP is about 18 trillion, and 30 billion of that goes out to 0.07% of that goes out to other countries. So we send out about $30 billion of GDP to other countries. So that's what they're doing. They're taking this and making you a livable society that you can walk to your grocery store, you can bike to your grocery store. They got buffer zones. Remember we talked about the buffer zones at the wall? They got buffer zones around lakes, so you can't really go to the lakes because you ever go to a lake down, there's a guy sitting at the lake and they're docking their boat, and he's checking underneath your boat for those species that are jumping from lake to lake. Right? Yeah, so they're all looking at it, right? They're so worried about these zebra mussels jumping from lake to lake, and we got 30 million people jumping the border and nobody says a word.
Asian carp, Asian carp.
So, but anyways, so this is what they're doing. They're doing smart growth, smart cities, so on and so forth. So I'm bringing it home. I'm getting closer to you guys. So Rochester, they, again, what does that say? Comprehensive Plan 2040. Every city has a comprehensive plan.
Oh, yeah.
And the comprehensive plan says in Rochester, they had a 2020, 2030, 2040. They're already working on 2050. By the way, this program that we're talking about, the United Nations, anybody have an idea how much this thing costs? To put this in the program? Just an idea. Well, anyway, not just $45 trillion just to put the point.
What?
The United States spends $7 trillion. Yeah, $7 trillion we invested. $7 trillion we invested into the Agenda 21, more than any other country. We also have the largest GDP than any other country. So anyway, so when you get to anybody from Rochester, a couple people from Rochester, okay, so I heard this last time. So when you get to Rochester, they're doing a comprehensive plan. Now you got to understand who runs your cities. These are your invisible governments. So in your government, you have a mayor, right? We elect the mayor.
Yep. Bad news.
We elect the city council, correct? Now your invisible government comes into play. Because we're getting so far away from government that the politicians don't have time because the culture is getting too big to be able to handle. So it's getting bigger. So what the mayor does is he appoints people into these positions, a task force. And so these people run the roads. This one runs. This is their big seat. He runs your Green Steps program. This guy here, Muhammad, he runs your transportation. They run these different programs. But you never elected them. But they're the ones who run the city, especially this guy. You want to talk about a guy who has probably more power than the mayor. That's the guy right there that has more power than the mayor. Because he creates the Green Steps program, and then he sends it off back to the city council, and the city council stamps it.
One of my ancestors.
Who elected the Green Steps program? Nobody. But he creates these programs. Get to learn the Green Steps program. This guy runs it. And then you got all the others. So these particular, this is his advisory board that he puts into place. Inside them, you've got a whole people below them. So this is the guy you got to watch in your city, in Rochester.
You gotta watch Mayo Clinic.
So now this is the Green Steps program. The Green Steps program is basically the carbon footprint. This is about your safe streets, the lights. You have to change out your lights, your roads, your parks. Everything becomes environmentalistic. Now, some of this, there's nothing wrong with this. There really isn't. I mean, I'm kind of an environmentalist myself. I like some of this stuff. But the problem with this is that this is written at the United Nations level, and they control this. Italy is involved. The League of Cities is involved. And if you don't, and once you sign on to this, you have to abide by the rules. There are 5 different levels. And Rochester is at level 85. They're actually one of the fastest growing environmentalists and fastest growing Green Steps or United Nations push in Minnesota right now. They're actually moving at warp speed. But this is an old graph, but you can see they're planting themselves all across across Minnesota. And again, all controlled by the UN. And so, you look at this was the book that was written, and in the Green Steps program, this is St. Cloud under their framework. You see, what does that say? Development that meets needs, that's the definition of sustainability. Look at what it says here, the developments that meet the needs without compromising the ability of the future generations. So you can tell that the city is involved with the United Nations. They're quoting the United Nations. So that now we got it down to the city level. We went all the way down here, and again, we're running the same thing, the same terminology. Nothing changes. It's the same terminology. But this is where you can stop it. Problem is, people don't know who's running their city. It isn't your mayor. And if you think it's your mayor or your city council, they just rubber stamp everything. It's the regional developments and the green stuff. These guys who get the grant money. So, is the comprehensive plan in every city? I just picked a handful of cities and put them up here. Rochester, Rhino Lakes, Coon Rapids, Corcoran, Stillwater, Crookston, they all have a comprehensive plan. It's the same terminology as the United Nations. There's no city that can escape this. But the problem is most people don't even know this stuff even exists. And they don't know the terminology. So, we got the cities, now we go to the counties. Do the counties have the same? Counties have the same plan. Counties have a comprehensive plan. The comprehensive Benton, Ramsey, Rice, Carver County, they all have a comprehensive plan. This is all Agenda 21. At each level, at each one, they have to follow the same plan. And they have different leaders who are not elected running each level. Does the schools have it? Do the hospitals have a comprehensive plan? Yes. All the schools and all the colleges have a comprehensive plan. You go to any college, it's sustainability, it's inclusiveness. See, it just goes on and on. When you walk out, your head's going to explode that you're nothing but a racist if you're white, because that's what this is. Inclusivity is about human rights, but this is all part of that. And also in the colleges and the hospitals have sustainability plans. Isn't it interesting that the sustainability plan is in every single aspect of your life? There's nothing that is missing.
Well, they've had since 1990s to take us over.
The churches are involved with the human rights, and that was the bishop I was telling you about. All part of this, yes. Churches, yes, but they fall into a different category. They're not, well, they are 501c3, but yes, they are. Yes, they can. They usually get it from the other foundations. Now, I'm going to show you another way this works. Okay. So, we know we elect the mayor, we know we elect the city council, I just said it. So I'm going to show you in another way to draw this home. They're down here. These are elected officials, but suddenly they disappear below the screen, don't they? They can't do anything but rubber stamp something. So who's the players that are involved? Well, they have an umbrella under each level. Under this level, you have the planning commissions. That's the 7 people I just showed you about with the Green Steps program. Every city has a planning commission, or something close to it. And every planning commission, certain cities have, St. Cloud has 22 different commissions that were not elected into their city. Wilbur has 23 positions of commissions not elected. Yes.
Well, my question is, when I go to the voting booth to vote, I want to vote for people who I know where they stand. And if I had to vote for every single commission or need that there was, I would never be able to get educated enough on those different people and their sides of the issues to vote. I'd have to be full-time doing that.
Isn't she wonderful? She answers our questions, doesn't she?
So
because we know we have an invisible audience. So you are answering all the right questions.
But you have to have somebody who understands the topic.
Exactly.
And is an expert in the topic.
So
making recommendations.
Do we have a Mr. Parrish in the audience? He understood everything. down in Everly, I've been to meetings across the state, the guy knows this backwards. But where did he get in this election? Because what happened? The foundations went around him and went to the grant money and bypassed the guy who doesn't have the grant background. Because we keep going to those people who have the grant background. Start going to people who don't have the grant background and start going to people who have some common sense, who understand law and the Constitution. Right. That's the way you fight it. He's in the military. He's a complete loyalist to the Constitution. He didn't make it, but you know, we need to still back people like him. I hope he runs again, but we still need to back these people as time goes. We need to understand where they stand on the Constitution. So anyway, okay, so these people disappeared under here. They're gone. All they can do is rubber stamp. Under the first umbrella, you have the Planning Commission and the Green Steps program. That's at the city level. Non-elected people implementing policies. Above them is another umbrella. It then goes to the regional government, and they sometimes can have 10 to 20 different counties inside. Now, if an argument comes up, they'll say, well, these people are some of these regional councils have mayors and county commissioners, not county commissioners, but elected people. Yeah, but they were never elected to be on the regional board. Nobody elected these people. These people, they create and changing local laws. The only people that can change laws are your Congress, right? So they're creating local laws. That's what they do. They implement them at the United Nations level. So you've got the Green Steps Program and Planning Commission, which could have up to 23 different commissions. They're at this level. This one here, your city is here, they go under and they encompass all of these counties. So now you've got a county board or a regional board, and they work with your county commissioners. And the county commissioners act like they're mayors, and they stamp it out because they apply for the grants. And then above them, you get into the sustainability movement, the 3 E's, and you start getting into the agenda. And they all follow this different level. And where do these people go? They're not there anymore. All they can do is they disappear and they can't answer your questions. I don't know. The county commissioners did that. I don't know. The regional developers did that. I don't have anything to do with that. They always push it off to somebody else. But these people they push it off to were non-elected people. And these county commissioners just love the regional developers because they can rubber stamp because they don't have to do any work. The regional developers do all the work. Non-elected people, they apply for grants, and the county commissioner says, hey, I'm a hero. I get reelected every time. Bam, rubber stamp it. He does nothing. He does nothing.
But don't they have to have public hearings or something?
They do they can have open hearings in counties, yes. But again, they're not, okay, let's say you had a hearing, you're on there, right? What do you do? Are you elected?
No. But
So-
I mean, they have to have public hearings and the citizens can come and.
Yes, they can.
If you are interested in your community.
100%. You can go to them, what good is it?
Yeah.
What good is it? They're not elected.
They're not elected.
So why are you listening to somebody who's not elected? Did you appoint them? Did you
No.
elect them? Did you ask them that they wanted to get a grant from that county? Did you ask them, oh, can I look at that grant, by the way, you just got? Can I look at, oh, good, sustainability is tied to it. Oh, can I deny that? No, I can't.
It would cause some censorship on their behavior if they have public hearings and they don't listen to the citizens.
No, see, that's what I like to hear right there.
Oh.
Because she's saying maybe we should go there and find out what the heck these guys are up to. Right, and that's what I want, that's excellent. You should be going there and find out what grants they're applying for. But nobody goes, and then, they're
We
elected.
just assume that they're responsible people and we're all working.
Yeah.
We don't have
So,
time.
exactly, yeah. So when you start to see all these grids going up and these solar panels and all this stuff going up, voted for them. Those were all created out of regional developments. Because they were what? Going back to her argument, or not argument, her statement, because she's right. If I put a solar panel up that is grant money, the grant money comes from who? the federal government, it now becomes an entity because it's tied to sustainability. It now becomes a buffer zone around it, around a farmer's piece of property. The farmer then, if he doesn't abide by the rules of that land that he gave up, that piece of land, he could then be violated and held in contempt of that agreement that he had. The more you let these wind towers on your property, the more you let these electrical grids on your property, you allow the federal government to come in here and take over your life. You slowly just keep giving them something.
But it isn't the world, it isn't the U.S. government that's after them, it's the world government.
Exactly. So, yes, sir.
And to circle it back around to schools a little bit, the schools are basically controlled by the funding that they get from the government, which a lot of these programs are involved in.
Right.
And if they don't do what's tied with the money, they lose the funding.
100%. Everything's tied to the funding. That's exactly right. Now, in 2013, did Minnesota know about what was happening? Sure, they knew what was happening. So they wrote a bill. Jim Newberger, you know, ran for state senator? Yeah. He was involved in writing this bill. He helped write this bill. And you know what happened? It was shut down. The people did back him, and they gave the authority to let these politicians and NGOs run over us like a freight train. That bill, H.F. 1833, if that would have passed, do you know how many states? I think there's 16 states now that have outlawed Agenda 21 in their state. And Minnesota is absolutely in full board and not outlawing it, but pushing it to a faster and farther level than you'll ever imagine. And they now after this year, it's actually going to escalate.
So how do you find out what states are against it?
You just go on the computer and you'll see. I think Alabama, Arizona, and really, it's really interesting because some of the biggest advocates that do not want Agenda 21, do you know what they are that are fighting it? You know who they are? The liberals in San Francisco. They are so against this. They are fighting this. We want to get one of them. She is a very staunch progressive, and she is one of the biggest advocates, and she is trying to shut this down because San Francisco is being taken away enormously, and so the liberals are actually fighting this. God bless them. Because remember, this isn't a Democrat-Republican issue. They figured it out, and they're being taken over in San Francisco. I mean, luckily, I got her name, but she's on the web, and she's just a wonderful lady. I'm hoping to meet her one day. We actually talked to her. We'll have our groups talk to her periodically. So, in 2000, okay, so I'm going to bring this back home to this guy right here. He's my farmer friend. I'm going to bring back to him. Okay, so we have one farmer in this, right? Yeah. So there are $7 billion sitting on the shelf in Region 9 right now. $7 billion of farmers' money. The farmers are, most of them are over the age of 65. They have one child maybe under the age of 35. And the other kids are what? Become very passive, very weak. They're more into this, they're not into working, right? So they don't know who to give their farms to. Do they give the farms to their kids? Do they inherit it to them? Do they sell the farms? Do they do? So the foundations realize, hey, wait a second. If we can tap into the farmers, $7 billion, and we can tell them that we'll take their land from them, we'll give you a tax. They're not the tax man, are they? But if you do this, you can get a tax write-off, and you can live on the land until you die, and you can farm the land. But once you die, the land is ours, the foundation. Now the foundation owns the farmer's land. It's big in Wisconsin, he says. I didn't know that. So here we are. The farmers are giving their land. Now, you can't, eminent domain is, under the Fifth Amendment, right? Jefferson fought it for years and ended up losing. So the government can't just seriously go in and eminent domain your property and take it, right? Not unless it's for some public issue. So what they do is they use the 501c3s, the 501c4s, because remember, they're 97% funded, right? So technically, a 501c3 is really a government entity, correct? Because they're given the money by 97%. So if they work for the federal government, they say, the landowner will receive tax deductions that bypass capital gains while still living and being able to maintain a stable source of revenue. The tenant can continue to rent the farm and the land. The county maintains its tax base. The foundation maintains ownership and acts as a steward of the resources to ensure the county benefits long terms from the income and generated. So look at the counties. Does any of these counties look familiar to you or cities?
Wow.
Look at here. These foundations are converging on these elderly farmers. I say that with respect. They're converging on the farmers that if you do this, you can get a tax that you can live in their land, and then once it's owned by them, they can take that money and converge on their city with millions and millions of dollars. And it says, in this area alone, there's $7 billion for the taking. And they are going to come after every one of you farmers. And they're going to come back and they're going to take it. And once they own the land, the government technically owns the land because 97% of that money comes from the government. So the government technically owns the land through a backdoor way, bypassing the 10th Amendment, right? States' rights, bypassing it, and they own the land.
So does the county lose the tax base then?
Well,
No.
right here it says up here, it actually says that. Up there.
They
No,
retain the
They
tax.
retain that.
The county maintains its tax base while the farmer lives on the land?
Yeah, it says that in there. You're asking a question. I remember reading that and it's in there.
It's the big orange space in the middle.
Right, but does that pertain to when, as long as the farmer is
As
alive?
long as he's alive.
But after he dies, the foundation takes over.
That's
there.
it,
You
exactly.
cannot tax the foundation, right?
Exactly.
So the county loses the revenue, the tax base revenue?
I'm not gonna say something I don't know. I don't wanna get into that. I don't know the answer. But they won't retain ownership of it, so. And they also, now, the farmer can take it, and he can say, what a foundation, what part of the foundation do you wanna give this to? They can then take that money and apply it to a different, maybe I want it for cancer research, we want this. So, okay, so now I'm gonna get back, now I'm gonna bring it really home. Remember I talked about the Blandin Foundation? The Blandin Foundation, who partnered with the Hormel Foundation, who partnered with the Mayo Foundation, which partnered with Otto Bremer. While it doesn't matter who it is, they partner with everybody. They converged on almost every single city in Minnesota. And they apply and they ask you to come to their retreat so they can create, and it's really interesting because if you look at their website, it says they only go into cities of color. I don't know if Plainview has a lot of color, but that's what they only work in cities of color. So now they're in all these cities, and you can't see here, but somebody say 45, 85, I think there's 85 in Rochester. They keep sending people from all these cities, and they converge on inclusiveness and welcoming cities and human rights, all Agenda 21 stuff, and they are just nailing these guys. They have to have a Myers-Briggs psychological test. And they usually ask people who are leaders of the community, doctors, mostly progressives, mostly women, because they're looking for people who work off of feelings and not on logic. But they're working for these people. So if you look at this, where they converged on all across the state, this was written in Plainview. This was just written, how many are from Plainview? Okay, how many of you know that Blandin Foundation just applied and they just put out the new advertising because they want to diversify Plainview. They want to take it from an old city and diversify to match the rest of the country. Did anybody even know that? So in about 5 years, when these conversions happening, and this was a letter written to Clarissa, it says that the Blandin Communication, they just applied for it. So once these people get into place, they're going to start putting programs for 501Cs to converge on their city, and they're going to start changing things in their city without your approval. And they're gonna work with their city council, they're gonna work, and you're gonna start hearing words of racism all the time now. You're a racist city, that's what happened in Austin. You're a racist because you don't bring in people. You're a racist because you don't, and this is gonna be the new term. And when does all this happen? When does all this happen? The Blanding Community Leadership held another community informational meeting. And it says that at the Sugar Lake Lodge, and this is about to happen on April 30th, 2019. This is coming up. They're going to go for 8 days on March 1st. They're converging on your city.
Yup.
They're coming for Plainview. Every city that has a Blanding in them, their foreign-born population is poverty rate is through the roof. They are through the roof. They are. You take Wilmer, you take all these different places, and you got a guy like here, Mr. Cruz from Wilmer. He went there 6 times. His whole dream was to multiculturalize this city and to take it over, and he did exactly what he did before he died. He wanted to see the city completely a different color away from what he wanted. He saw his dreams. The guy, the mayor of Long Prairie, said his dreams came true when he seen the city go from all white to multiculturalism. Bonnie Reeds, the Hormel Foundation, said that. Tom Steen, or was the mayor of Austin, Minnesota. Tom Steen, the mayor of, I've talked to all these people, except for Bonnie Reeds. They were happy to take these cities and get rid of you white folks and replace you. They are the good replacement. They are happy that we did this. I went to speak in Long Prairie when the mayor found out that I was coming. You know what he did? He shut down the Legion Hall. He shut down the Legion. He didn't want anybody to know what he did.
Really?
Anybody to know what he did. They shut me out. I ended up going out to outside a town like this. We had 350 people show up and they found out what he did. These are the people. This is in Wabasha. These are the people that have already been. Anybody from Wabasha? These are the people that have already been to the Blanding Foundation. This is the mayor right here at Wabasha. These are the people you have to watch for. These are your progressive, big time ones that are going to go in there. They're the ones that are going to make the changes. These are your dentists. These are your doctors.
Big money.
They're the ones that are going to make the changes. This is Lake City. Anybody from Lake City? Okay, this is your Lake City. These are the people that are going to now, they are converging on you, and they are coming back in 2 months to do the next sessions, and they're going to be backing up, and they're going to be taking over so this is all the people. The one you really got to watch for here is this one right there. She is an attorney lawyer. She is for refugees, for immigration. She's an activist. She is she wants to, I don't know, I shouldn't say that for sure, but I just know what that. You got a lawyer.
Now you said it.
So she's very involved in this and she loves the,
She's well informed.
yeah, she is. I'm not saying that she would, some of these people fall off. Red Wing is coming up. Anybody from Red Wing? They're coming up here on this month. Red Wing is coming up here this month. So all around you are being hit heavily by the progressive movement that's going to come to your city and do what they did in Austin, Minnesota. And they're going to do it. Okay. So in Winona, this is the United Nations picture, and this is Winona. This is the United Nations picture, and this is Winona. Do they look similar? Do they look similar? They're following, Winona's following the United Nations. They became an inclusive city. They became the first one to sign on with welcoming America. They pay dues. The funny thing is they don't even have that many people of color in that city. They're just preparing, because why? Because Blanding came in there and prepared them for the onslaught of what they're going to get. And then, okay, so then let's Tim Waltz's transition team. This is really important. Tim Waltz just created a transition team of 29 people. Okay? If you look at this transition team, not a lot of businesses in there. One mayor from Fergus Falls. Most of these are powerful foundations. Because why? Because Because Hormel is really technically probably what got him into office, because he was back pocket Hormel. Interesting enough, these four here are the four that I go everywhere and talk about, and he puts them on his transition team. All I did was put an article to defending Dick Day, who was running for Congress one time in the newspaper, and this guy goes out, and remember I said they will come out and they will slaughter you in the newspaper. I just said I like Dick Day. And remember, they'll go out and they will attack you. This is what they do. Not even born in Minnesota, born in Puerto Rico. I think his parents might have been in the military. SEIU. He's probably got more power. You guys ever heard of Howard Real? He's probably got more power than just about any politician. He's the one that gets the $15 increase hikes. He's the one that gets the prayer in schools. He gets the hijabs working he runs the SEIU. This guy is powerful because we gave him power. You better get to know who he is, because in the next 6 years, his name's going to be full-fledged right in your face, and he's going to tell you who you are and not even from this.
What's his name? What's his name?
I'm being real. I'm going to show you a picture of him in just a second. Okay, so then, you guys know who this name is? Second one. Anybody? He's the head of CARE.
Jelani Hussein.
Jelani said, now he knows me personally. He puts my picture up on his power screen, God bless him. Every time I'm in a room, he takes it out and he puts it back up again. Says that we cannot let this guy tell everybody what he knows. He doesn't like this stuff to be out. They don't want this out. That's why he puts me up. He said, one of the most dangerous men in Minnesota, he puts me up on the screen. He does not want this stuff out. But he gets put on a transition team, and the Council of Islamic group is on the Holy Land terrorist trial, number 22 on the largest terrorist trial in America in 2008, and this was an unindicted co-conspirator. And we put an unindicted co-conspirator, and many politicians want to put them back on the terrorist watch group, and they want to put
The Holy Land Foundation trial.
Holy Land Foundation.
Council on American Islamic Relations is an unindicted co-conspirator.
To what?
They're Hamas, actually.
Co-conspirator to what?
A terrorist group. The Muslim
Co-conspirator to do what?
to take over the United States.
She asked some good questions, and I love to answer
It's
questions because
federal documents.
she's here for education.
Part of the federal record.
In 2008, there was the largest. In 2008, there was the largest terrorist trial in the United States. What happened was a guy named El Barassi and his wife were traveling across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, and they were monitoring and they were photographing the pillars on the bridge because they were going to blow it up. So they were the port authorities seen them driving down the road. They then arrest them, go to their house, and below the house they find a treasure trove of information. They found it in a safe box underneath, and they said they couldn't believe it was how they're going to take over America, how they're going to take over North America.
I'm glad they got him.
And
That's good.
explanatory memorandum. Well, anyways, they were on there. They were number 22 on the indicted co-conspirators. And many politicians want to put them back on.
Do you want to see the documents?
Even Tom Emmer, a congressman, says he has nothing to do with them. He thinks they're the most vile. I know. I get it, but I'm just telling you. Even the congressmen don't like him. This guy here, head of Hormel. We went over Hormel and what they are. They run many of the different processing plants all the way even to Wisconsin. So this is really what Tim Wall's probably in the office. The last one here is Blandon Foundation, and I told you Blandon is converges. So here we are, we got 4 of the most powerful entities, and he puts them on his transition team, and then he starts working with the Indians. And what's really interesting about the Indian tribes that he puts in here is that Blandon is working inside the Indian tribes, trying to get them to be more inclusive. Wait a second, these are inclusive. Aren't these territories? So they're working on there, and they're trying to get them more inclusive to bring more people into their culture.
But you also got Tom McLaughlin, the former legislative chairman for the Minnesota Veterans of Foreign Wars, a retired Blue Earth County commissioner and a Marine combat veteran.
Yep.
You also got some people from the university and different colleges. I mean, it's not just all
what's
one
the-
viewpoint.
Okay,
that's
this one
common.
here, Tawana Black, you gotta look her up. She has a very, very illicit background. Look into her real
President
heavily.
of
You're looking at,
Labor's-
yeah, you know what, you can pick and choose, but
Right,
why would
exactly.
you, but why would you put a terrorist group on your transition team?
Exactly.
Okay, so here you are, number 22, Islamic terrorist group. You can see that this is them. They changed their name here because they didn't want anybody to know. So this is them. The United States group CARE is named by the United Arab Emirates, the largest Islamic group in the world, named CARE as the 82nd most powerful terrorist group in the world. That was named by the most powerful Muslim organization in the world, named CARE a terrorist group. And what did we do? We put them on a transition team in Minnesota. Okay, so you can pick and choose all you want, but if you had a bowl full of M&Ms and you had 1,000, would you eat one? Would you eat all of them? Would you do one dead one, one
I
terrorist?
don't eat the green ones.
Okay, okay, there might be a bad green one in there. Okay, so we go back to who? We go back to Javier. This is that. Now, Minneapolis Star Tribune says that he's the head of SCIU 26. The Minneapolis Star Tribune says, meet the thug of pastels. They said he's one of the most vicious individuals in Minnesota. And he is completely successful. And you can see he and his allies pushed for the statewide minimum wage hike, secure higher wages for workers, the hijabs, all of this stuff. This guy, again, not born here in Minnesota, but has a lot of power. Get used to that name because he's coming to you. He's coming your way. So I'm going to switch gears on you because now I know we're getting late, but there's some things that you have to get to. This is a sustainability in your community. This is Ban Ki-moon on the United Nations. He says in the inclusive cities resolutions that we see in all these cities when they want to be inclusive, he says if we get our towns and cities right, we'll be closer to achieving the SDGs. We have to get our cities right at the national level. He says that, Ban Ki-moon. And then, so you go to the Welcoming Cities resolution. This is the guy, you asked about that audit. You were asking about the audit. This is the guy, Jeff Johnson. He fought for the audit. He couldn't get it. This is the guy who was a henchman for Obama. He worked in a foundation for Refugee Resettlement in Tennessee. He then starts the Welcoming City Commission, and he then goes on to the United Nations and shakes the hand of Ban Ki-moon. They give him an award because he's multicultural to the cities in America through the Welcoming Cities Resolution. And he is targeting all the cities. So what happens when you go and you get on the Welcoming Cities Resolution? What happens? You don't vote on it. Remember I talked about no representation? You don't have a vote. Your city council does it. So what happens is, the city council says, we want to sign on to a Welcome Cities Resolution, which is part of the United Nations Habitat 3, number 11 on the SDGs. So what happens is your roots or your foundations go up the board, they go all the way, and this way and that way, and they pass out the grants. And then the bishops, remember the bishops on the board, what do? They're the ones who go in this direction. So these guys are passing out the grants, and the bishops and the churches are going here until we do that's a humane thing, to be inclusive and welcoming, not knowing that it comes out of the United Nations Habitat 3 Human Rights Council, and then the city, they do a Welcoming Cities Resolution, and then the people say, wait a second, we ain't voting on this. And you notice that back here, all these people in St. Cloud were fighting. I mean, we had over 300 to 400 people in the room saying, we don't want it. The city council votes it through. It was a big turmoil from the St. Cloud Times and the Minneapolis Star. So they signed a welcoming resolution, and everybody disagreed with it. So the city is still unwelcoming. They're not happy. We've been welcoming in St. Cloud. We had Polish, Irish, Swedish. It didn't matter what we were. We invited everybody in that city. There's never been a problem. So suddenly we have to make a resolution, but the resolution doesn't come out of nowhere, it comes out of the United Nations. So they say, okay, they signed this, and the people are upset. So what happens? What happens in the game of chess? You have to get the stakeholders involved, right? You have to get the stakeholders in. The stakeholders come in, and they start working with these the David Lubell of Welcoming America, or cultural brokers. They start working with all these different communities, and they start calling you a racist. They start calling you a homophobe, a xenophobe, an Islamophobe, whatever it is. They start calling you all these different names.
Xylophobe.
Finally, these people just said, I am so tired of being called a racist. I grew up in my home school. I played sports. Everybody loved me. And suddenly, I am a racist in every move I do. I can't go to church. I'm a racist. My pastor calls me. I can't go to school. In the paper, they call me. Everywhere I'm doing. My mom raised me to be a good child. And suddenly, I'm a hater because of what? Because these guys put it in the plane, and they call it, and they will talk. So what happens is, these people say, I'm tired. Just sign the resolution and leave us alone. Thinking that it's just nothing but a piece of paper. That's what they said in the moment. It means nothing. It's a paperweight. But they don't realize that Welcoming America then signs on to them, and they have to pay this dues, like Winona did, and then they sign on to the comprehensive plan, or the sustainability plan, and now they're on board to the United Nations agenda. They have to get. And now they're actively working for climate reactive response. They're working for the United Nations. So all they had to do was call you a bunch of names. See, I don't care what you call me. I really don't. In 30 years I'll be dead anyway, so what do you really matter? Seriously. What's the really? Call me anything you want. I stick to the Constitution. I stick to the Bill of Rights. I don't care what you call me. So let's bring it down. Now we're going to bring it down to Rochester. Rochester signs on to they sign on to what they call the Inclusive Cities Resolution. They start using these foundations.
Step outside, please.
This one here is another foundation. This one I want you to get to know. And this one here, I got to tell you, if there is a most maniacal thing I've ever had to come up against, I'm going to tell you a story, true story. This past summer, I asked somebody if they would get me into the League of Cities. Now, they kept this very quiet. Only the cities knew about that they were going to have this conference. Every city in Minnesota got invited. It was in St. Cloud. And I thought, I really want to go there. But you had to be a mayor, city councilman. You had to be something, right? Well, I asked a friend of mine, she got me as a guest. And she wasn't even on the part of it. She done walking away with it. So anyways, we got in there, and we wanted to go to the Inclusive Cities meeting. We wanted to see what they were talking about. So I went down there, and what I witnessed, if I was one of those guys who, with a camera, I wished I could show you what I witnessed. They did movies on how Minnesotans are racist and white people are racist. That's how they started off our meeting. White people are racist. Then we got around the table. Now, most everybody in the room was white, except we had a black African across from me, broken English. But everybody would get Edina, Wyoming, all the cities. And so they started talking about how we were all racist. So then I'm sitting there listening to this, and it was like a reverse Ku Klux Klan meeting. I'm not kidding you. This is not a joke. They were vile in their presentation. So then, as they were going on in this presentation, they were talking about how they always had a Muslim lady up in the front, and she had the hijab on, and she was pounding her fist, and she said, "We need to get rid of these white laws, these American laws." And these mayors and city councilmen started cheering.
Oh my God.
I looked at this and said, "Are you kidding me?" They started cheering. We need to get rid of these white laws. And they said, "Yeah, these white Americans, these white people, you're a bunch of racists." And the guy across me, I'm sitting there, I haven't said a word. I mean, I'm sitting there, I'm almost thinking that these people are gonna like, if they think that I do presentations or whatever, I got the noose ready for me, So, the guy across me, we had to go around the table. They wanted to know how many people were in your city of ethnic race. I said, "Well, there's few." I said, and then the guy across me, the African guy says, I can, and he broken English, he says, I lived in Africa. I come from an apartheid, and Minnesota is worse than any apartheid I have ever been in. You're nothing but a bunch of racists here. And he looked at me and says, I can see a racist from a mile away. It snowed. And he's like, look, what is, so here you are saying that Minnesota is worse than an apartheid, and these guys are cheering him on while the Muslim is pounding the table. This is the League of Cities that's in your city. So finally it got around, and I said, I just went back, and I said to my table, we were in a group, and I said, am I born, seriously guys, was I born on a different planet? You know, no, seriously, I said, I lived in Los Angeles. I lived in a Jewish community, a Hispanic community, I lived in everybody. And we don't even talk like you. I have never seen this. We don't talk about race, we don't talk about anything. Where's all this coming from? I said, problem is you guys want to integrate, and the Constitution wants to assimilate. We want to bring people into this culture and be part of the American heritage. You want to bring people in and you want them to keep their own heritage by themselves. You want to be separate but equal. That's your problem. They didn't like that. So I had to leave. I came back by the time, well, they asked me a couple questions, who I was, so I told them. I had to leave. I came back because they had a free meal. I came back with a free meal. And so I'm eating, now they got a psychologist and they're telling us about how we should never listen to our own thoughts. The Delphi technique. Wow. These thoughts are, and she's doing this whole array of how Delphi technique, and how we're psychologically, we're all screwed up people. And so they wanted to know who I was, so I told them. So anyways, well, I left there, and they wanted, so I left, and about 3 weeks later, I get this call, and asked me about going to this meeting. I said, yeah, I was there. And I said, can I call you back? I got some people here, I'll call you back. No, you can't have my number. But he said he was from the League of Cities. And I told him who I was. I didn't have my name or number. I had my name down. I didn't have my number, telephone number. They searched out my home. They searched out where I live. They searched out my cell phone number. They searched my cell phone number. If you don't think that the government is watching you, following you, they searched out where I lived, my home number, cell number, what I was doing there. And this was the League of Cities. This is Big Brother. They want to know who you are and why you were there. And I told them, you're nothing but a bunch of racists. And I said, well, did you come back? I said, not only will I come back, I'm bringing people with me next time. See what these movements do. They put up these signs to discriminate you. And these are posters that they put up in the cities. And then, now, here's where we're going to start getting really interesting if it hasn't gotten interesting so far. This is a cultural diversity. Now, the mayor of Rochester signed on to this inclusive cities. They didn't call it the Welcoming Cities Resolution because they knew it would be too much controversy. So they changed the name because the real name is inclusive. So they changed the name, and it's part of the what? Comprehensive Plan. Comprehensive Plan 1999. So it goes on to, again, human rights, right? To Rochester seeks to prevent and prohibit all discrimination practices based on race, color, creed, religion, and ancestry. I'm going to ask you guys, why would you sign on to something when that's already protected anyways under the Constitution?
Yeah, good question.
Where is it outside of the Constitution? Bill, is that protected under the Constitution? Why would you need that if it's already protected? There's no reason for you to even have this. It's already been. So why? Because they're joining the United Nations resolution for inclusive cities and Human Rights Commission. Why? Oh, here's important. Why the Human Rights Commission? Why do they have a Human Rights Council in all these cities? You know why? Because this is an international law. This isn't American law. When you do human rights, you're under the Human Rights Commission, under the UN 1948 UN Human Rights Commission, which tried to be changed in 1990 by the Cairo Declaration by Islam, who tried to change this, And these two are battling it out because they're incompatible with each other. So, we know the mayor signed on to the Inclusive Cities Resolution, but then he also signs on to another one called Journey to Growth. Again, he signs on to another Human Rights Commission issue. He double whammies the city, and his Journey to Growth, the 501c3 comprehensive 5-year plan. I believe this was a $4,500 program, effectively to grow diversity in the economy of the Southwest region consisting of multiple counties, without borders. Why would a mayor sign on to such a radical? And so who are these counties that, now he doesn't just, here's the deal. He's not just reaching to Rochester now. He's reaching out to all these counties.
It's actually worse.
Remember we talked about regional planning? They're going after you under human rights, under international law, and not American law. That's why she countered the fist on that table and said, we got to get rid of these American white lies.
She wants to get rid of our constitution.
What's Sharia?
There's 80,000.
So, Olmsted County right there. So, on the UN Council, okay, so she signs on to this. So why is this important? She signed on to the European Council. She didn't sign on to an American Constitution. They signed on to the European Council right here for the UN, the Council of Europe. An instrument is advancing the principles of democracy. What is the United States? A democracy or a republic? Why did this mayor sign on to the principles of a democracy and human rights? Because they don't want a republic, they want a democracy. So, this European, the Council of Europe, so I looked into the Council of Europe. I had to read their whole background. The Council of Europe, I thought, well, first of all, it's unconstitutional because this is a human rights commission under human rights of 1948. It's in violation because what is the supreme law of the land? Our Constitution.
Constitution.
This is the supreme law of the land. This is not the supreme law of the land, and they're trying to find an international law under human rights. They're trying to, remember what I said? You bypass the 10th Amendment, you go around the 10th Amendment. That's what they're doing. They're trying to make these initiatives. So if you have kids that are 5 years old, and they're now 30, they'll say, well, it's always been this way my whole life. We've always been called racist. We have to always do these things. So they make these initiatives. But now they signed on to the Council of Europe. Now the Council of Europe, if you look at that, it's in total contradiction of Sharia law. Well, I thought, well, that's great. That's great. But again, it's not a United States law. They signed up with UNESCO, which we got out of the World Bank. But here's the kicker. Okay, you have to follow these guidelines. Here, politicians, civil service, businesses, and professional people, citizens and group, and even media are acting in ways consistent with the common goals creating inclusive cities. And where does inclusive cities come from? SDG number 11, Ban Ki-moon, Habitat 3, systems are beginning to change their own process and policies, to change their own process and policies. The root causes of inequity, discrimination, and lack of cohesion are examined and addressed. You can see this is all about changing laws. Why would a city council sign on to that? And they did. So, we looked at it. I looked into the European Council, and I wanted to go a little deeper into this. Isn't it interesting that the European Council says they're against Sharia? But what is Sharia? Sharia says that, now I study Islamic law. I study, in fact, I know the Quran backwards, inside 1,000 years before, 14 years under. I can do a whole Islamic presentation for it. This one here, it says, now, it's against Sharia law, but look at here. The ruling effectively establishes a dangerous legal precedent. European Council. It establishes precedent, a legal precedent, one that authorizes European states to curtail the rights of free speech in such that speech is deemed to be offensive to Muslims and thus poses a threat to religious peace. So what they're saying is, if you sign on to the Council of Europe, you cannot say anything derogatory towards a religion. So anything, I can't say anything about Islam according to what that says. So if I said, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that's insulting Islam, isn't it? Because they believe the opposite. I can't say Jesus is the Son of God because it's insulting their religion. I can't say that I love my Christ the Lord, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit because it's in direct violation of this. And they sign on to that. Mm-hmm. Your religious freedom in Rochester has been put on notice for...
That's correct.
For Human Rights Commission. So then I go a little bit farther, and
What takes precedent, the Constitution or the treaty?
What do you mean?
The treaty subverts the Constitution. When that treaty was signed, the UN treaty and the Rio Treaty, that subverted our Constitution.
Oh, yeah, I know, exactly. That's correct. Now, you look at it here. Now, Olmsted County Human Rights Commission, Thursday, January 19, 2017. Now, this one here, I'm not sure if they totally passed this. I see they approved it all the way. I think they passed it. But this one here, they actually got a cultural broker that came in to another human rights, another one about inclusivity. Here's a third one. This one is about women. So then I went into the CEWA that has to do against women. It's battered women. So this is a worldwide deal. But Commission Scully questioned that the motion was asking the commission to promote the city of Rochester and Olmsted County to sign it. He goes into looking at it. So later on, I go and see, and they all were approving it. But they must not run into it very deep because it says many state parties to the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that's what it is, discrimination against women, assert that they cannot fully implement the convention because it's a conflict of Sharia. So why would a city council sign on to this if it's in conflict? Because if they sign on, it's a conflict of Sharia. So here we've got a city council that is leaning towards Sharia.
Oh, God.
You saw it on one night. Now, these were signed. If I go this one, I can't tell you that. The last one, you'll actually see the signatures at the bottom. So we've got a subversive city council are signing on the international laws, implementing Sharia law under hate speech. I want to get into that. So, the sustainability goal. Now we go into Rochester again, and in Rochester, under the sustainability goal, it says that the Charter of Compassion. Is there anybody here who's, I know Tony is here, raise his hand, godly Christian people, right? I bet there's a few in there. So, you're not going to like this one too much. The city signed on to the Charter of Compassion. Has anybody ever heard it?
No.
You just saw some really radical other things they signed on to. The Charter of Compassion is one of the, it says it has added the 17 sustainability goals to their own agenda. Again, United Nations. Why would they sign on to a Charter of Compassion? What is Charter of Compassion? Remember I told you that the Agenda 21 has to have its own military and its own religion and its own government? Charter of Compassion says that a lady named Karen Armstrong, she was once a nun, left the convent, and she started this thing called Everybody Has a Compassionate Base. We are all compassionate people. And there's nothing wrong with that. I agree with what she's saying. She goes throughout the world and she speaks at the United Nations. And she's trying to push this utopia or Unitarianism of a one-world religion. Instead of there being all these religions, and you can believe in whatever religion you want, Catholicism or Islam or whatever, but everything is based off of compassion. I'm thinking, okay, that's fine, I can get that, but it's still based on the United Nations. And they're signing on to it. And then she's got 7 points that we have to abide by. So we have the 10 Commandments, but she gets away from the 10 Commandments and she only goes to 7. And is love thy neighbor and do unto others as they would do unto you. And she says they all have the same philosophy. Islam does not have that because they don't have a golden rule in Islam. And they do not have love thy neighbor as they would unto you. So, but she says that all the religions are the same under the SDGs. So they want to go to this one world Unitarian religion where all the religions are the same. You can believe in Catholicism, but you must eliminate pieces of your religion that have any violence to it. So the first testament of the Bible would be eliminated. You would have to eliminate almost 86% of the Quran because of all the violence in the Quran. You have 149 verses of the sword. You have verses, the whole 9 chapter would have to be taken out because it says you must kill the infidel over and over again if they don't believe in Sharia. So all those verses out of the Quran would have to be taken out. But anything that has to do with any religion, that any violence has to be taken out. So she's saying you must eliminate and take the pieces out that are violent and always go into a compassionate and the 7 points of compassion. This is your one world religion. And they're going to this, and the United Nations is pushing the Charter of Compassion. So what does the city of Rochester do? They sign on to the Charter of Compassion without ever looking into it.
Oh, Mayor Brady.
And they sign on to this, written by 18 men and women from
Scumbag.
multiple countries with 6 different traditions, transcends religion, ideology, and so on and so forth. So they don't even, this is all written, this is written right up in the United Nations resolution, and this guy signs on to this. He's writing one after another human rights issue, and human rights is under the United Nations. So they can come back at you and say, this is what was written into our charter in this year. So, if we look at this Charter of Compassion, if you notice the people, the groups that have partnered up is the Unitarians and the Islamic Corporation. This is the Islamic groups. But it's a Unitarian idea, right? It's a Unitarian. So who's the new mayor of Rochester?
Kim Norton.
What is she?
Unitarian,
She's
Universalist.
a Unitarian. She's part of the one world religion. She admits it. She's a Unitarian. She goes out there and she preaches. She's part of this Rochester Chamber of Commerce, the League of Women City Borders. She's part of the NAACP. She goes on and on. Her list of what she does is just enormous. But
Rotary Club,
She also,
Christian based.
she also tried taking our guns in 2008, or in 2012, and then also her and Lucas Dayton, they put Minnesota $37 billion in the hole by stealing money out of the pension funds.
she did?
Yeah, she's part of it. Yeah, I confronted her on it. You should
She's
have
got
seen
a
it.
history behind her. I don't know. I just know of this and what she's done. I think Rochester is really digging themselves a hole.
You go to
with this.
statedata.org and you get the info on it. Go to 2016.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on her
She's a
because she's one you want to. So we got to go to number 1, and we're getting close. We're going to go to number 1. This is the SDGs. They want to eliminate poverty. Now I've got to show you these things because they're important. Remember I told you that the 9 MOLAs, voluntary agencies from the federal government? There's now only 7 because now you see that the Catholic bishops made $551 million off the refugee resettlement.
Wow.
They get about 97%.
So much for compassion.
I know Lutherans get 97, 98% federally funded. So I ask you something. If 2 of these disappeared after Trump dropped his numbers down from 85 to 40, that's what they did, and they start jumping ship, I ask you, if it was about humanitarianism, why are they jumping ship? Because they ain't getting the money anymore.
The money.
That's right.
So it's not about, it never was about humanitarianship. This was purely a profitable program for these people, and you see them jumping ship left and right. But these are the organizations that they make millions of. In 2008, they were at $300 billion. In 2015, they're at $1.8 billion. These guys are making
That's
a lot of
right,
money,
they'll convert.
and $5,000 a head out the refugee resettlement program. So, just in Minnesota, the tax, I'm gonna give you some numbers now. In Minnesota, we pay $870 million in welfare to refugees. Annually, the refugees are about $867 million in welfare benefits taxpayers pay each year. The taxpayers are billed about $1.8 billion in full cost for resettling refugees after 5 years. American taxpayers will have spent $8.8 billion.
Good grief.
That's a lot of money when they're working for low wages and not paying those state and federal taxes because they're below the $25,000 threshold. So they're getting all of that, not paying in the system, and then we're taking care of them with all these others.
Ron?
So if you look at Minnesota, there's 457,000 immigrants in Minnesota, but I actually got in a discussion with the Chamber of Commerce out of Minneapolis, and we had a conversation at a Rotary Club. They thought I was a Rotary Club member. There were 3 different clubs there. I stuck my way in there. And but anyways, he started bragging about how they have $8.9 billion worth of money that they contribute back into the system. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money, 8.9. Hey, they contribute, these refugees and immigrants, they put so much money back in there, we need more. And we're about to lose Electrolux, which is 900 jobs in St. Cloud. So all the businessmen are like, you want us to bring in more people? We're losing 900 jobs. How is he going to sell this, right? But they want us to bring in more. Yeah. So it goes on to talk about that. I said, well, let me ask you a question. If 8.9 billion, I said, how do you explain the remittance program when a refugee sends a large portion of his payments home to his country? I said, Mexico just hit their top at $28 billion last year. We are the second leading GDP to Mexico. Did you know that? The remittance program that's supposed to be here to pay for your roads, your police department, your taxes, your schools, they're taking that money and they're taking it back to their homeland. And now remember, $1 in Mexico is probably worth $15 here, right? So for them to send $300 home a week, that when they leave here, they can live like kings back there. So they're sending home. Do you know what the worldwide remittance program is? Money leaving countries, $414 billion a year. Minnesota gives $28 billion just to Mexico alone each year.
Wow.
Here's where Trump is correct, and I hope he does this. I don't think the wall will ever be built, but he could say, okay, here's the deal. Mexico will build the wall because all I have to do is shut the remittance program down. They don't get the $28 billion. It stays here. Boom. It stays in our economy, and we build the wall for a lot less than that. That whole argument he's saying is absolutely 100% true. Shut the remittance program down. We, as many of you probably heard about the $100 million going out in suitcases in child care. That's all remittance called Hawala. And a percentage of that, 0.25 of that goes to, there's a percentage of that goes to terrorist organizations. That's obligatory according to their religion. So let's look at the illegal immigration. They pay about $717 million. This is what we're leaving the burden on our system. This is the amount of money. $717 million just in Minnesota alone. These are the Minnesota stats, by the way. So I'm going to share this with you. So if you don't think that they're a burden on our society, the Center of Immigration Studies says this. If a well-educated person in Minnesota, which is a college graduate, they get what they call means testing. And means testing is where you get welfare, and you get Social Security, all of it. There's 90 different programs. And it equals to about 79 programs, it equals to $927 billion annually. So, if the college graduate gets all of this, he doesn't use very much of the means testing because he's working. He doesn't need the welfare program. All he's going to do is pay for cops driving down the street and the roads, right? He uses very little of our money. So he only receives about $25,000 in benefits to keep him secure for roads and highways. But pays about $54,000 in taxes. So he's a plus, or she is a plus, an asset to the American society, about $29,000 a year. A high school without a diploma, they get means testing, so they take more and absorb more of welfare and whatnot, and these programs. But you see the discrepancy, they get a lot more benefits. But if without a high school diploma, they work for a lot lower wages. These are older numbers, but they pay about that much in taxes. So they're actually a deficit, which is $6,000 difference. So they're actually a net deficit on our society. If you take an illegal immigrant, they don't get the means testing, do they?
It's not a citation.
They don't get means testing because they're illegal. But they can get means testing, and how? 14th Amendment. All I gotta do is have a baby or two. My kids get the welfare. I work under an assumed name. My kids get all the welfare, and then I'm in the clear because I can work under an assumed name, but my family gets all the welfare. So an illegal immigrant, they get about the same as them and receive benefits, but they work for a lot less. Why? Because we know they're slave labor, right? So they're working for a lot less. So without means testing, they're about this much on a deficit. Which money? Now you take that money that they're sending back to Mexico or overseas, that takes this and more assists. After 13 years, it goes up to about that number there. So if you take a refugee and illegal do not have the same status. When a refugee comes, they're immediately given the means testing. So they go back up here, but they're without a high school diploma. And most of these people that live in refugee camps, they have less than a third grade education. So they're going up here and they're taking more of these, and they're actually taking even way more than this because now we got ESL, English as a secondary language, we got school, we got house, we got daycare. So that number actually more evens up more. So I'm asking you folks, logically, do you see that we're going $20 trillion in debt? You want to know why? I mean, we're absorbing. We're just taking over. I just thought of something. I just read it yesterday and I remember it. Most of your illegals live in California, where I live. Hard workers, they are. And right now, the Colorado River is drying. That's the main source of water. It's drying. Arizona and Colorado are trying to make a treaty with Minnesota on the upper Midwest. They're trying to get us to divert the Lake Superior water down to take care of the resources in Arizona and California. Because they keep bringing in more and more people, taking more and more resources, drying up our lands and our lakes, and now they want to tap into Lake Superior. I just had to throw that in there because they're working on that.
And we have a local government in Minnesota that will give it.
So let's look at this one more. A legal immigrant gets about for 1 million illegal immigrants equals to $65 billion. $69 billion. So you take that by 11, and I think it's closer to 30 million. You times it by this number here. And that's without children, because 65,000 goes to 135. Actual net lifetime fiscal cost of a legal immigrant is likely 125,000, 235,000 per illegal alien, or nearly twice the cost of the concept of place. So you're seeing a big difference here. Take that by 11 million, or take it by 30, which the actual number's up to 30 million. So Rochester is a little bit different than most. Rochester brings in a lot of doctors. They bring in a lot of higher-end people. They're not like St. Cloud. They're not like Wilmer. So Rochester gets a lot more educated people who work in the hospitals and whatnot. But Minnesota has taken in 100,000 of the lowest part of the educational level percentage of high school education. So we're actually getting the secondary migration. So look at what we're getting hit with.
Yeah.
If you look at the rest, these people, Rochester isn't getting hit as bad, but you look at Wilmer and St. Cloud, Look at what they're getting. 8.8% of them even have a high school education. This is what's in Minnesota. Somali population is the largest population outside of Somalia right now. Outside of the second. Minnesota is the #1 secondary migration for refugees and Somalis in the nation. We are number
Probably more
one.
Germans here too than there are in probably the second in German or Nordic to Norway and Germany.
Is that a problem?
Yeah.
Well, they're educated. I don't understand the question. I don't
Yeah, tell us the meaning of that.
No, I don't know. No, she's right. So what does it mean? You made a statement. What does it mean?
It means that it's a part of the population, just like the Germans. We're a lot of Germans here. We all migrated
Okay,
here.
so
We all migrated here.
again, let's
Are they
clarify
legal?
this. Let's clarify
No.
between 1880 and 1940, we had the largest population, German population. And that's when we had the Germans coming over here from the Germans. The reason they settled up in this country is because it basically mimicked Germany. Secondly, is the Mississippi River divided the Louisiana territory from the original territory. So when Minnesota became a state in 1858, they needed to have what they call people occupy that land because the land wasn't even occupied. So they brought all the Germans. Now at that time, yes, they brought a lot of Germans over here. They did have the potato famine from the Irish. They brought them over here. But when they brought them over here, they didn't have what at that time? They didn't have the technology. We didn't have the welfare. We didn't have anything. They came in there on their own volition. If they didn't make it, they lost.
Charity. They
They
gave
would
land
lose
to
their
farm.
farm.
Their lives.
And it was bad times for those people. They didn't get the welfare. They didn't get the
Yeah.
free
They got
rights.
land. They got land.
And they could lose the land if they didn't prosper the land.
Exactly.
They could lose the land really fast. They didn't have the elevators. They
So
started
you
from
think we should have
scratch.
Somalians in?
The Homestead Act. They started from scratch. They had to build their own tools. They had to build their own tractors. They had to farm their own land that wasn't in their own elevators. This started from nothing.
They didn't ask.
So to compare those two is almost, that's not even a good comparison. That's not even, it's not. Okay, a little bit more here. So when you look at here, the refugee program, you can see what was brought into Minnesota, 13,584. These are all the people that were brought into Minnesota. In 2018, look how much has dropped. 40 Somalians went down to 48, and that was only in the first 6 months. They're actually at 0 right now. Liberia's at 0. So you're seeing a big difference in what's coming in here now. This is really good for a lot of reasons, because now it gives the opportunity of the refugees that are here to assimilate faster without nation building. I think this is a really good thing, because I think we can work with what we have, and we can work with them, and I think we can make this successful. But the way they were coming in here at the large rates, we couldn't make it successful.
Supposedly Waltz is bringing in 120, 100-some thousand more in.
Yes, I read that.
Well, yeah, they're already here.
No, he's bringing more in.
Oh, really?
That's the rumor.
That's what I heard.
Okay, so you can see the refugee rates amongst Middle Eastern refugees. You can see the food stamps at 91%. They're at 74% at 1 year, but you think that after being a refugee after 1 year, your food stamp ratio should go down, right? It actually goes up to 91% after 5 years. We're becoming a dependent society on our.
Yeah.
Now these are not my stats, but everybody knows this. These are not. I'm just relaying them. So, and then the goal number 10 is the equity. I can buzz through this quick because we already talked about the money that leaves the United States in the remittance program, the amount of money that should be staying home here, taking care of our own people. We send it out, and this is what they call redistribution of wealth. You heard Obama say that. Why did he say redistribution of wealth? He did not mean take it from the poor and give it to the rich. According to the SDGs, he was taking it from the rich countries and giving it to the poor countries. That's the definition of sustainability.
The owners of the building would like to ask you to leave the venue at this point. The owners of the building are asking you to gather your belongings and leave.
So
would you be willing to do that?
I don't know.
Anyway, so then you've got the remittance program here.
We don't need to know who the owners of the
So
building
we
are.
got the
You're being
remittance
asked to
program,
leave
you
the
see the money
venue.
leaving here at a high rate.
You can
and
grab
that
your
money should
baggage
stay.
and you can leave the facility immediately. You're being asked to leave
Okay.
by the organizers of the event and the owner of the building.
He's the organizer.
No, no, ma'am, you're not here to debate it any further. There's no further discussion.
Do you want me to leave?
I want you to leave the facility.
You said that I'm asking
You're
you
leaving the
questions.
facility.
Ron,
You can
during
step
the
up
break,
and
pick
go.
up those two pieces.
Grab
that
your
I'm asking-
baggage and leave the
You
room.
said that I've asked some very good questions.
Yeah, take a look at
So
it.
I'm sorry that I am more open-minded
That's
than you are.
inclusion
Yes, I don't have
and
a hole in my
compassion.
head.
And read
Well,
my note.
obviously you don't, because you don't have any air in there to let out.
This guy is up here telling
Thank
us
you.
to question what we're being told, and she's doing exactly that to him.
Yeah,
Yep, that's okay.
I mean, isn't this
I don't think
freedom of speech?
I think we're being
Isn't this
asked.
freedom of speech?
No, it's
And-
not.
And questioning? But he's not.
You're not listening and you've been
I'm
disrupting the
moving.
event. You're being asked to leave the
You're
event.
actually the one who's disrupting.
Yes, I am. I'm finishing it.
Let's be civil.
Yes, I am a piece of work.
Good job.
I understand, okay, let me just focus on it just for a second. I don't mind that, and I'll tell you why. Because this is a problem. I don't mind that. I'm just trying to reach her in a way that I need to reach liberals as much as I need to reach conservatives. We already have conservatives. I personally think this should stay.
And you did a good job.
God help us.
She's absolutely asking questions.
But I am not the organizer. But
Hey, let him talk. Let him talk.
what do you mean? I'm dead.
Uh-oh. Plug you into the charger.
We can hear you anyway. Your voice is coming.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. I'm not the organizer of this, so I have no control of that. But free speech, I'm all for free speech. So, but I have no control of this.
Well, they wouldn't give you free speech if you went in front of their place.
No, they won't. No, you're 100% right. But well, it's true. That's what we're fighting.
You have to be better than your opponent. Yes, you do.
Okay.
I makes the whole world fly.
All right, hold on.
Let him finish his talk.
Quiet.
Let him finish his talk.
Okay. So we're getting some important stuff here. So I know this is getting long, but I just want to give you, to get back on track again. As I told you, they set a record, I said 20, they set a record last year of 26 billion. Some of this stuff we went over. Now we go to the number 3, which is healthy, under SDG, it's called healthy sustainable. Now this is when they start going into your, remember what I said, they're going to start monitoring your health. They're going to start knowing how many shots you have, what shots you should get. They're going to start monitoring you at the SDG
You didn't have to
level.
carry her out.
So, and outbreaks of 17 cases of multi-drug resistant. Just in Minnesota, we have 17 cases that the drugs do not work on in Minnesota. Now, I just took a clip of Minnesota, so I wanted you to see this. If you look at this, there's a lot of zeros up there, isn't there? If you look at this, there's 0 across the board, but let's look at Olmsted. This is the amount of tuberculosis in Olmsted County. In 2003, 13, 10, 15, 24, 14, goes on and on. 171. You guys could put 80, 75 counties together, and you would beat every single county when it comes to the tuberculosis cases. So this is an alarming picture. This is your county. So if you look at your county, you've got Hennepin, if you've got Hennepin and Minneapolis, look at here, Hennepin County. They have 1,252 tuberculosis cases. If you take Edina, Bloomington, and Ridgefield, they have 103. These 3 major cities, you guys are 171. What is that telling you about your tuberculosis cases in Minnesota? It's bad down here. This is really, really an issue that you guys need to pay attention to, what you're, when she sneezes. Good ad lib, I like it. All right, cover her up. Okay, so let's look at the poverty rates, the poverty rate census. It says the poverty rate for a native-born person in Rochester is around 9.2. That's below the state average and the national average. But if you look at the poverty rate amongst foreign-born, they're at 25%. So I'm asking you the question, if you cannot take care of, you want to keep bringing more and more people into this country? You want to keep bringing more and more into this city? And you can't take care of what you have already? You got a problem. Because if you can't take care of your children, and they're at 25% poverty level, below poverty, why do you want more here? You can't take care of what you have now. It doesn't make any sense. Let's bring in more people. Let's create more poverty. If you create more poverty, then what? Then we create more programs.
Yes.
More programs create what?
Yeah.
You know? And I want you all, I've been showing these graphs wherever I go, and something just happened since the last time I was in Rochester. Do I believe that they're monitoring me? Do I believe that they're watching me on YouTube? You know why? This graph here, when I go look up the poverty rate, because I always show each city what the poverty rate is, you know what they did? They changed. This says, nope, this says native born, and this one says native born.
What?
Really?
Oh.
They changed it. They will not let you know. It still has the same stats, you gotta know how to read it. They don't want you to know that there's a foreign-born population in here. They changed the stats under Minnesota. They're taking out the word foreign, they're taking out the word illegal, they're taking out a lot of words. So you can't track this anymore. You can't track this. Their government is playing a trick on you. They don't want, and I can pull this up for you. I can't find it anymore. It says native born. I know what it is, but I know what it is. Native born, native born. They must be tracking me because I'm the only one showing these stats. Nope. Colors are the same. They just
took the words out.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
changed the words, yes. Native born, native born. Yep. So in Rochester, Minnesota, you have a black poverty rate. This is unbelievable. You guys, remember I just told you it was 25%? If you go into the blacks, you're at 43%, almost 44% below poverty. If you can't take care of your own citizens, why are you bringing more in? This is your area. So if we look at 2012, I know it's an old graph, but you can see all these people at the state average as you cross. But if you look at the small end rate, they're still in the 60th percentile. And their unemployment rate is up in that area too.
But the thing is, this is the globalist plan all along.
Yes.
They've been trying to do this with all the first world countries.
So now, the last part of this is where I really want to hit home with you guys, because I think this is the most important part. Well, I think a lot of it's important. I go out and I speak. I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota to talk about free speech. First right amendment. When they found out I was coming, they banned me from the city.
Yeah, figures.
Now, they said that they put it out there, they banned me from doing any event there, because why? Because they signed on to an inclusive cities resolution that people like me can't speak in cities like them. They banned me, Sharon Haney, Phil Haney, Jim Simpson, all of us were banned at once. We are not allowed to speak in certain cities, they will ban us. Free speech is now being taken away. They are monitoring me on YouTube. I believe that someday you'll probably hear my name on the front page of the newspaper. And I'll be died by an accident or something, it'll be something strange. But they something, you know, they don't want this message out. So what does the First Amendment protect? This is your First Right Amendment. So when I went there, and when I was at St. Cloud, they stopped me from speaking at the Legion. So they stopped I wanted to speak about I lost my freedom of assembly, and I lost my freedom of speech. I wanted to talk about religion, I couldn't do that. And when we went to petition our own government, they wouldn't listen to us. So this is what they're doing. And you must know that this is written up in the refugee guide. It says that refugees and immigrants are entitled to the same universal rights. Where's that come from?
Yeah.
United Nations.
Yeah.
And the fundamental freedoms which must be respected, protected, and fulfilled at all times. However, migrants and refugees are a distinct group governed by separate legal framework. See that? Refugees are in a different category than citizens. Even though they're considered citizens after when they get here, they're under the Human Rights Commission under the United Nations and not under the auspice of the Constitution. They got the Constitution and they got the United Nations Human Rights Commission protecting them. And then they got their own, in some cases, their own laws of Sharia. So it says only refugees are entitled to specific international protection as defined by the International Refugee Law.
Wow.
Separate, but equal. They say they're citizens, they're separate, but equal. That's why they get away with so much. You know, we hear about stuff they do in the news, because they are protected under international law. So the term Islamophobia, we hear that a lot. And I like the ending of this. It says a term of abuse invented in the early 1980s. And they did. They invented this in England in the 1980s. A guy, I think his name is Tom Phillips, I remember right. He wished he never would have coined that phrase. But he said the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT. Where does that come from?
Sharia.
The explanatory memorandum, the IIIT, is on the Holy Land File Charter. They're another one of the unindicted co-conspirators along with CARE. Did you know that? This is an unindicted co-conspirator. They're the ones out of Herndon, Virginia. They're the ones who created the word in America to stifle your First Right Amendment. It was used as a weapon to stifle your free speech, to subvert the Muslim Brotherhood, to characterize as a phobia, irrational fear of hatred, what is actually a sane, justified, and moral correct response to the evil that Islam is. And I believe that. So, under the international law in 2007, you guys aren't going to like this too much, but under the Human Rights Commission, everybody is considered an individual. You're considered an individual as a man, a woman, if you're gay, straight, if you're whatever. You're all considered individuals. In 2008, the United States General adopted a resolution combating defamation of religion by 108 to 51 with 25 abstentions. The resolution expressed deep concerns about the negative stereotype of religion and manifestations of intolerance and discrimination in matters of religion belief. But the only religion mentioned by name is Islam. So it says, what this resolution did in effect was give Islam the right of human status. 1.8 million people are considered one now as an individual. If I insult one, I insult. If I insult one gay person, I only insult him. Or one white person. If you insult one, that's why they're coming at you, that you cannot, your Islamic, your speech is being taken away from you under international law because Islam is considered one as a whole of 1.8 million. This should be very alarming to every one of you because this is passed and the European Council tried to stop this and they were outvoted by. Is it the United States and can it apply here? What do you guys think? We got the First Right Amendment. We got the freedom of speech.
But you can't speak in South Dakota.
Yeah, but that's the city, right? But under the Constitution, I have the First Right Amendment, correct?
Right.
So, in 2005, and we're going to push up to 2011, Hillary Clinton goes to a closed-door meeting, and I wish I had the video. We don't have Wi-Fi. It's a 4-minute video. You guys can look this up, Hillary Clinton and United Nations 1618. She signed on to a Russian resolution 1618, defamation of religion. She was in a closed-door meeting with Exotoglu, that's this guy right here, and a closed-door meeting with the head of Turkey, Ahmetli Exotoglu, the head of the OIC. Closed-door meeting. She came out of that saying, I don't want to bring this to the United States because it's going to destroy the First Right Amendment. She goes into a closed-door meeting. She signs on to United Nations Resolution 1618. She brings it back to the United States. Remember, it cannot pass, right? It's in violation of the First Right Amendment.
Yep.
So what do? They backdoor it, don't they? In 2015, day after Christmas, over 100 Democrats signed on to House Resolution 569. The defamation of anybody who says anything towards Islam can be fined or thrown in jail. Over 100 Democrats signed on to that resolution in 2011. This was my video I can't get. So it says, now, if you look at defamation, it says that if you blaspheme Islam under the 5 levels of jurisprudence under Islamic school of thought, and these are the schools of scholar. It says that if anybody blasphemes religion, there are to be a death sentence. So in most countries that have Sharia, if you say I hate Islam, it is a death sentence at all levels of Islam. This is in the religion. This is obligatory. So if they got Sharia law here, this is obligatory. You will be killed or subjugated until you convert or repent. So this is there. So under Hanbali, Shafi, Malaki, all of them, so the death sentence says the punishment is death. International law, they got voted in as a human rights as one individual. Do not blaspheme. So we're still in America. Does Hillary Clinton get what she wants? Well, Hillary Clinton did, but it says, but her conference announced immediately to reignited OIC's demands for the West to punish. The OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 heads of state, the largest bloc of the United Nations. When Obama said, do you remember this? I went to 57 states. Yep. And everybody laughed and said, he's a Harvard graduate, he's 57 states. He wasn't talking about 57 states, he was talking about 57 heads of state, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. He went to them, and nobody caught that. It says that she brought that over here, but 569, the Islamic verse is 533 and 3357, the blasphemy laws. She brings it over here. It says, condemning hate, bigotry, and violence and rhetoric towards Muslims. 569. So, does that mean anything? No, it means nothing. 100 Democrats signed on to it. It means nothing at this point. They can't get anybody to pass this. But they're pushing for it, right? So they have to change the terminology. They then, the anti-defamation, the Jewish population gets involved, and they want to be added to the list. So they add them, so they change. This is have you noticed this is that all Muslims is included? So we go into here, and you can see Keith Ellison's name's right at the top, along with who? Tim Walz. Nolan, they signed on to it. So Tim Walz is the right directly in your face to take away your right to free speech when it comes to religion.
And our guns.
He's on his way. This is so important. This is so important, guys. So then, what does Keith Ellison do? He holds up the Antifa.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
So he's smiling, he holds that up. So, now, 569 doesn't go anywhere. They had to change the terminology, right? Had to change the terminology. They had to include a few more. They had to say Sikhs, Hindus, minorities, blacks, Christian or Jews, but what name is missing out of there?
Christian.
This is missing. On Senate Resolution 118, Kamala Harris, Feinstein, and one Republican. One Republican sign on and sponsor the bill to take away the First Right Amendment to all Christians. He signs on, Mark Rubio signs on the Senate Resolution.
Mark Rubio.
So Mark Rubio, and if you look up, it'll say he is a treasonist to the First Amendment, he is a treasonist to the United States Constitution. He signs on to this, but again, it doesn't go anywhere, so they, oh, I take that back. I take that back. This was passed at the United States Senate. It passed. This passed the Senate. So now what does that mean? It's sitting in the House right now. This close. They got 67 signatures, 42 of them are Republicans right now, and they're getting more and more signatures. They just reignited it in March of this year. They brought it back up, and they didn't table it, brought it back up. If this passes, House Resolution 257, this is Mark Rubio, he passes this. Oh, and what's really interesting about 118 before I go to 257, who wrote 569? Was it our government? No, look who wrote it. The organization of Emerge USA. The former USA, a Muslim organization. Two Muslim organizations wrote United States Resolution 118. Two Muslim organizations wrote Senate Resolution 118. They weren't your politicians that wrote it. They wrote that. And these senators, look at, they saw nada. They were excited that that happened. They elated. They cheered Feinstein and Rubio for what they did. They commemorated their hard work. So, did your politicians write this? No, they didn't write that. 257. So now it goes to the House. Now it's sitting in the House with about 67 signatures. And they're gaining more and more signatures as time goes on.